Sword of Coming Chapter 1005. To the Gods. I saw Li Xing stepped on the two Fushan mountains, and suddenly the Dharma was at least doubled in height. His feet drove the Fushan mountains, as if walking in boots. Li Xing turned his side, but left the golden mirror made of natal characters in place. Like a soft but resilient wall that continues to block the way of the ferry, Li Xing then hits the wild world with his back, and the Lu River behind him is like a brand new track that has been relaid, diverting the original green road. Li Xing Fa Xiang leaned back, raised his feet one after another, and stepped on Taishu again. The Fa Xiang leaned back a little bit, shifted the direction of the ferry boat a little bit, and pushed the entire wild world into the Lu River waterway. The back of Saint Li's gigantic Dharma image rubbed an incomparably splendid glazed brilliance with the entire barren world. Among the ancient demons who came to watch the show, only Li Go and Anonymous were left. Wu Ming couldn't help but took out the jug again, took a sip of wine, and said with a hearty smile, "No doubt, Bai Yujing, who is really invincible and invincible, will definitely not be able to beat the little master." Li Gu said, "Is there anything to be happy about?" Anonymous nodded and said, "You must be happy. This shows that over the past 10,000 years, no matter how many so-called geniuses and techniques, they are still not as high as our monks." Li Go said, "It can't be calculated like this. In the past 10,000 years, the little master has studied a lot of techniques." Wu Ming's face was strange, and after holding it for a long time, he still couldn't hold it back. He raised his hand and patted the boy with heavy pupils on the head. "Do you know why you couldn't get along with that group of human race Taoists and scholars back then?" Li Gu said, "I can't speak." The little man smiled and said, "You know that. This man with no name and no surname, even without the real name of the demon clan, really had a good relationship with Mr. Sanshan Jiuho back then, and could be regarded as half a friend and half a drinking buddy. Probably because of his loose nature, he has few friends and not many enemies. Different from Bai Jing's method of killing the opponent as soon as he has a vengeance, the short man's several shots are all for his friends. Therefore, the man regrets that Lu Chao, the sword repairer who failed to return to the wild, will become a new drinking friend." Bai Jing laughed so hard that although she had never seen the messed up end with her own eyes, she only guessed a general situation, and then she pretended to be sad and said loudly in a heartfelt tone, "Sadly, heartbroken, teach people to be heartbroken. You are confused." The man laughed dumbly, turned towards Bai Jing, raised his hand, and shook the jug in his hand. "Why didn't I know that you, Bai Jing, like to talk slander so much?" Bai Jing rolled his eyes and waved his hand, indicating that we are not familiar with each other, so don't get too close to me. My little Mo has a small mind. If Xiao Mo misunderstands me, I will kill you. But if you are willing to give me the jug in your hand, we will be brothers and sisters in the future. This short man likes to listen to the sound of the wine swaying in the jug while drinking wine. The jug in his hand is actually one of the old ancestors of the later generations. Apart from the commemorative significance, because it is only a semi-finished product, the rank is not too high. Nowadays, almost every one of the Earth Immortals has a square-inch object and a close-up object. It was originally from Lan Qi, one of the 10 richest people in the world, and she was the first to forge and refine the mountain utensils. It can only be said that the appearance of this type of object has a far-reaching and inestimable impact on the entire mountain pattern of later generations. It even greatly increases the chances of winning the battle of the cultivators in the original world. The man took a sip of wine, wiped the corners of his mouth, and had no reason to think of one of his few friends, the Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, who told the truth after drinking. Let those Taoists who should not be forgotten be remembered by future generations for a long time, even if thousands of years have passed, even if they are only remembered by one person or a few people. Behind Li Xing, Mr. Sanshan Jiuho finally made his move. He sacrificed a stack of talismans, and there were only two kinds of big talismans. With the characters of water, he rushed forward on the road in the wild world, cut a long river of time, interrupted the mutual traction between the ferry and the original trajectory of the green road, and then used the character of mountain. Walls were erected on both sides of the wild world in the Lu River, just like long embankments were built on both sides of the riverbed, so that the ferryboat could appear to fall downward, but actually rise uphill. At the same time, Mr. Sanshan Joho began to use his natal supernatural powers to drive the mountains in the wild world. The Dadi mountains that were immediately blocked by the sundial in order to migrate by this young cultivator could only be confined to the boundaries around the strongholds in the vast world. On the top of one of the highest mountains on the other side of Shirwanda Mountain, there is a rickety old man with empty eyes. This old blind man who does not even have a watchdog at his feet is standing alone on the edge of the cliff, reaching out and rubbing the depression cheeks, as if hesitating about something. The good disciple who opened and closed the door seems to be a sage of the academy now. However, the nerds in the Confucian temple are relatively stubborn, and they said something before, which is not an example. It seems that by accumulating a new amount of merit to help the apprentice become a gentleman is hanging. And what he wanted to do with the few strokes on the merit book of the Confucian temple, after thinking about it, the old blind man thought it was meaningless, so he turned around and walked through his residence, passing by Li Huai's house, stopped, pushed open the door, and saw there were several pots of wine and a stack of books on the table, and Yuema was going to let his master read the books and drink them. In addition to driving the Lu River that looks like lichen spreads in the air, Yu Xian is not idle. This great monk who exclusively owns the word Fu Lu is whimsical and powerful. He is trying to draw a talisman on the road of the Lu River, turning a part of the long river of time and using this to open a gate to help the ferry get farther and farther away from the established green road. The machine was exhausted, and Yu Xian had to give up angrily. He did a quick mental calculation. The number of ways was right, but he was not prepared enough and was too hasty. If he was given enough time and refined a large number of talismans, he might be able to do it. There are 2 gates built in the sky and the outer world. The ferry boat enters through one gate and exits through the second gate in an instant, just like the return passages that connect the 2 worlds. Lu Yan shook his head and said with a smile, "Yu Daoyu's idea is good, but it is difficult to make it happen." Yu Xian laughed. "If you talk about any other Taoist context, it's easy to say, you can talk a few more words, but fellow Taoist Chunyang and I discussed the talisman together, but there's really nothing to talk about." Although the edict was ordered together, most of the decrees were cancelled by the barbaric sundial. In addition to offering the 2 big talismans, Mr. Sanshan Joho still has a magical power that presses the bottom of the box. I saw him raise his hands as if he were origami. He actually folded the long river of time behind Li Sheng, as well as the 4 directions of heaven and earth, repeatedly, and then gently placed the paper kite on the luha. This kind of means of reaching the sky is like tying a knot on a piece of clothing. All the warp and weft threads of this piece of clothing are pulled to the knot to varying degrees. Then fold a large piece of the green path behind the wild world, and also fold out a paper kite. In the end, the 2 paper kite talismans, like 2 fish baskets with opposite openings, gradually closed, holding a giant fish in their pockets. This is a quack character that has been developed for a long time but first sacrificed. If Mr. Sanshan Joho was a guest at Baiyujing Green City, Ko Ming and this senior asked for the knowledge of talismans, and finally created several great talismans including the Sanshan talisman. Then, Mr. Sanshan Joho also relied on this harmonious atmosphere to discuss Taoism, and got small gains, such as the character, Quan, which specializes in overcoming, dismantling and breaking all kinds of small worlds, of great monks between heaven and earth. Taoist Chunyang smiled knowingly, and fellow Daoist Lu from Baiyujing must have contributed a lot. It must have been when Mr. Sanshan Joho and Headmaster Ko were sitting and discussing Taoism, Dao Yu Lu deliberately made a joke. Those who have attained the Tao are like slaughtering snakes, forgetting their body and shedding their shackles. Most of the practice is to cross the river and abandon the boat, get the fish and abandon the trap, go up the room and take the ladder. In fact, this kind of behavior has nothing to do with good or evil, and has no derogatory meaning or praise. It's just that the Taoist meaning of this big talisman of Mr. Sanshan Joho is fundamental, and it's unique, just like an elder, reminding the later generations of cultivators who are juniors, don't forget their roots. Or simply pierce a layer of window paper and directly tell those so-called monks on the mountain that the so-called Taoists today are far from truly attaining the Tao. Yu Xian's eyes widened. How could Fu Lu play like this? Whether it's a big formation in the world or a small world, isn't it all without exception in the face of this talisman? After seeing this scene, Lu Yan observed it carefully, and seemed to understand something, which was beneficial to his own swordsmanship. A woman in colorful clothes appeared beside Mr. Sanshan Joho. Her clothes were swaying, her huge body was as big as a hanging moon, and her golden eyes were different from the coldness of the gods. Her eyes, face, and attitude were all gentle and gentle. Soft and very human-like. The true spirit of the world's talisman, her status and identity in the talisman is like the ancestral money of those kinds of immortal money. This is probably the root cause of the fact that Fu Lu Yuxuan cannot fit into the 14 realms of Tao by relying only on the actual talisman. Not to mention the refining of tens of millions of talismans, no matter how many there are, Yu Xian can't rely on this to prove the Tao. Just because of this road, the former sages have been sitting on the broken road, and the Ascension realm wants to enter the 14 realm, and the most afraid of walking is a single plank bridge that already has people on the other side of the bridge. For example, if there is Bai Yi, Su Zi and Lu Qi will not be able to pass through the 14 realms of Wenyun and Dao. When Xian Du watched Sun Huaizhong, Xiao Mo was one step too late. If there is Wuzhou, Li Ho must reroute. This talisman spirit, born of the manifestation of the Great Way, stands at the end of the riverbed of the Lu River, with a huge Dharma image, facing Li Xing and Mr. Sanshan Joho. The talisman of a woman's appearance is like planting rice. Every green seedling inserted in the paddy field is the countless talismans she scatters into the outer space. Obviously, she wants to lay out a new green road, so that the ferryboat in the wild world can follow this trajectory and gradually move away from Hauran. Jing Juzhong shook his head. Li Shixing asked with his heart, Mr. Jing, what's wrong? Jing Juzhong said with a smile, even if the entire established Qing Dao is changed, as long as a new trajectory that truly fits the Dao is not created, it will still be futile. No matter how advanced the Dao of Mr. Sanshan Joho is, he can use the method of talisman to reproduce it. All-encompassing, it is not enough to support the whole world's great Dao circulation, plus the reason that seniors don't seem to often set foot in the wild land, makes this road, although the rank is slightly better than the great demon Chuxing, it can be said the degree of sturdiness is somewhat inferior. Let's assume that Zhou Mi has no backers, but don't forget that there is more than Zhou Mi in that new heaven. Therefore, even if there is a new road that can be roughly regarded as following the rules, it is still not foolproof. Li Shixing continued to ask, what would Mr. Jing do instead? According to Jing Juzhong, even if Li Xing and Mr. Sanshan Joho join forces, coupled with their stacked formations, it seems that there is still no surefire solution. Jing Juzhong shook his head and smiled, it can't be me. While a stacked formation had not really touched the wild world, Chen Pingan tried to copy this temporarily unknown talisman in the Heart Lake, but to no avail. Only its shape is incomprehensible, and Fu Lu's shelf will soon be crumbling and collapse in an instant. After several attempts, it is such a bleak result. It's like the family is too thin, and you can only try to use the worst material of Huangxi talisman paper to carry the true meaning of a high-quality Taoist book, of course it won't work. Then there is Chen Pingan's moon in the well. Due to the addition of 600 gold and copper coins, the rank has been improved. It can probably be called the moon in the well. It is a pity that the more than 700,000 flying swords are used come to set up. I really can't make time. Start a small stove. Chen Pingan immediately asked in his heart, Xiao Mo, if I build the framework of this talisman, can you fill the veins with sword intent? Xiao Mo shook his head and said, I'm a layman in Fu Lu's business, I can't help you, and you'll lose 1,000 miles. Even if you return to Hauran, if you can calm down and deduce it over and over again in the dojo, it's estimated that you will only be wasting your sun in vain. Precious time for cultivation. Looking at Bai Jing, Xiao Mo reluctantly said, it might be better to replace Bai Jing to be the sun's helper. Chen Pingan had no choice but to give up. The young cultivator entered the stacking formation in an instant. Master Chen Shan, temporarily change me to preside over this great formation, and you will prepare the backhand. In addition to relying on stacking formations to completely reverse the bow of the barbaric world and forcing it to step into a right track laid out by talismans, it is also necessary for this young hidden officer to sacrifice a key sword in the way, interlocking and missing one. Not possible. Chen Pingan nodded. Mr. Sanshan Joho asked, do you know how to draw a sword? Chen Pingan replied, the younger generation reluctantly does it. Jing Juzhong heard the words and smiled playfully. Mr. Sanshan Joho clearly noticed the strangeness of Jing Juzhong, and asked in his heart, Mr. Zheng has something to say. Jing Juzhong smiled and said, there is nothing to say. The original stacked formation was just like a duckweed leaf on the water. After Chen Pingan handed over the dominance of the large formation, Mr. Sanshan Joho sat in it, and a talisman that did not lose to the holy sage appeared behind him. Times, but not the kind of dilution, but does not reduce the degree of condensedness of these second-class authentic dojos. Bai Jing grinned, let out a snort, and then gave an unbiased and fair evaluation. As soon as the expert made a move, he would know whether it was there or not. Chen Ping's placement was unheard of, but he just scattered his mind out of his true body. Looking at the edge of the bird world in the flying sword cage, he saw Mr. Sanshan Joho, a Dharma image composed of countless talismans. In the end, many dragon veins meandering for thousands of miles, all the veins are gathered by the water characters. Several deities in the history of the world can see the waterway here, a head on the neck, and the scene in the mind is like a bright star. But it is not the Milky Way where Fulu Yuxuan's path is located. It seems to be an accumulation of countless unknown constellations. The avenue is huge, incredible, beyond imagination. The matter was of great importance, and the young monk had to remind Chen Pingan again, I am only the abbot of the Great Formation, you are the Great Formation itself. I can only try to help offset the impact of the savage world against the overlapping formation. You wait until it is really unsustainable. At that time, you don't need to support hard, just take back the 2 flying swords, and leave enough strength to ensure that you can hand out that sword. In the view of Mr. Sanshan Joho, Chen Pingan is not only the origin of this magnificent stacked formation, but also the shortcoming of this great formation. It's just that he can't insist that one age is the age of no confusion, especially for young chi practitioners who are less than 30 years old. To be honest, even with a vision as high as Mr. 3 Mountains and 9 Hours, it is quite difficult for Chen Pingan to achieve this step. In fact, in the previous calculation with Li Xing, there were 8 Hauran candidates who were similar to Chen Pingan. Among them, there were 3 sword cultivators, such as Qi Jinglong from the Taihui sword sect of Beiju Luzhou. There are many choices, such as several people, or 9 people working together, and there are more than 100 kinds of combinations. The final conclusion was that Chen Pingan was chosen alone. Either those choices with great risks and benefits are relatively the most wrong-free choices. Chen Pingan nodded, I won't make a swollen face as a fat man, I will definitely do what I can. The young cultivator took out 2 blue-purple talismans from his sleeves and handed them to Chen Pingan to introduce the purpose of the talismans. One is used to fix the soul, the other can stabilize the body, and can be used at the same time. Don't use double talismans unless it is a last resort. We must pay attention to the timing and do not act impulsively. Once these 2 talismans are used too early, the human body and soul will be rooted in the middle of the flood like a pillar, just like a pure martial artist who is casted with a talisman and can only be beaten. If you fight back, you only need to look at to know what happens. It is like hitting a stone with an egg. Therefore, it is best to use it to heal your wounds immediately after removing the stack to stabilize your mind and body, so that your soul will not scatter outside your true body. It hurts the root of the road. Chen Pingan carefully put away the 2 priceless life-saving talismans. The whole wild world was sailing in that Lu River, and the rites of the holy Dharma had changed from the posture of leaning back against the ferry boat to pushing the stern of the boat with both hands. The entire back of the sacred Dharma was consumed by the wild avenues into a pitch-black nothingness. This kind of loss of the avenues visible to the naked eye is immeasurable. For any ascension realm or even a 14-realm cultivator, I am afraid they will be involuntarily feel despair. Mr. Sanshan Juhao's 2 origami characters, together with the golden round mirror made of Sage's original characters, ensure that the ferry must travel within the Lu River. The talisman Jinling, who is the maid beside Mr. Sanshan Juhao, is at the end of the Lu River, responsible for paving a new road, and has built a talisman road that is millions of miles long in the void outside the sky. The new road deviates from the green road, which creates a clearly visible arc. And Chen Pingan's stacked formation is just outside the top of the arc. Like a large formation of heavily armored infantry defending an elite cavalry army. After the ferry collided with it, it instantly tore open a hole in the cage, and then slowly embedded into the stack. Suddenly, there was a piercing sound like a blade slowly cutting the glass. Even outsiders like Anonymous and Li Jiao who enjoy the scenery from a distance have their scalps numb. Wu Ming hurriedly took a sip of wine to suppress his shock, stunned, and said, "It hurts a little bit to look at, let alone the person who is carrying it." Li Jiao glanced at the young hidden officer, who was as small as a mustard seed, sitting cross-legged at the sky screen of the sword formation world, temporarily unable to see the slightest change in expression, holding his breath, as still as a mountain. Wu Ming said with a smile, "I don't even frown, I'm a young man. It seems that our physique, Chen Yingguan, a martial artist, is very reliable. It's just that I don't know who taught the boxing. It's so impressive. The same is true of standing and talking without back pain. This anonymous person can speak more than Hu Tushuan can hear." Fu Lu Yushuan and Taoish Chunyang, who were sitting in the sun and moon of Xiao Oxiandi, began to mend the hole respectively to prevent the bow from breaking through more barriers in the world too quickly. A savage world, a stacked formation, like 2 flowing pills in a river, the former rolls away quickly, the latter is still, and the size is disparate, the place where the 2 touch is like grinding discs. Jing Juzhong nodded lightly, the tenacity of the stacking formation was a bit better than expected. In fact, the Confucian temple must have prepared for the worst, that is, their group could not stop the ferry from outside the sky, and eventually the 2 worlds collided. So Howran World's choice of the collision point is very interesting. Jing Juzhong guessed that the choice of the Confucian temple would be the Middle-earth Confucian temple. At that time, the candidate to replace Chen Pingan will be the Jingsheng Shiping, who is equivalent to a 14th-level monk in the boundary of the Confucian temple. The vast world, the Chinese Confucian temple. An old scholar was even more worried. Standing on the top of the steps of a pavilion, he couldn't bear to look at the outside world again. He hurriedly retracted his gaze, turned his head and said to an old friend who looked like a scholar beside him, "Brother Shiping, they all say dripping water. The kindness should be reciprocated by the gushing spring, then the kindness of the gushing spring can't be reciprocated with water, it must not be like this. Jingsheng Shiping said helplessly, how to care about this matter, the Confucian temple has its own interpretation. If it is true, Chen Pingan seems to have not asked for a place in the Confucian temple so far. The old scholar was not happy when he heard it, stomped his feet and said, if you only care about things, don't care, the world is going downhill, how can you be full of saints? Not to mention you and me, we are all scholars. Jingsheng Shiping became more and more helpless. It's not like you don't know what happened to me, you can't help but I'm not official, and I have to follow the rules. Due to his identity, Jingsheng Shiping really couldn't talk to anyone about any personal friendship. Even if he is in the Confucian temple, he does not participate in discussions. In fact, the old Shuozai didn't want to be flattering, just to distract himself and chat a few words, lest he look like a sloppy young man. Walking into the pavilion, as soon as I sat down, I stood up like a fire on the buttocks, but resisted not moving to the pavilion and stretched my neck to look outside. Not still like the ants circling on the hot pan. The old Shuozai began to mutter and babble, like a drunk man talking drunk at the table. After reading hundreds of thousands of sage books, you can't just pull out a piece of shit. The common man poops and urinates, and he can fertilize the fields, and the scholars who have a bad mind will not catch the dog if he poops. Occasionally, good things and hard-working people will make the hard-hearted person soften. The cultivator, the continuation of life, the height and the length, lies in the depth of the traces of the world. Jingsheng Shiping sat on the side and listened silently, just got used to it. A stack of formations began to gradually crumble, and those broken flying swords fell between the heavens and the earth like a torrential rain. The golden-filled peak where Yu Xian was sitting has completely dissipated, and the Liuli pavilion in the middle of Jingju also fell apart and exploded with a bang. The scene was gorgeous and radiant. A wild world turned the bow of the boat with an extremely subtle range, and slowly shifted to the trajectory laid out by the true spirit of the talisman. Lixing Dharma extended a hand to offset some of the momentum for the stacking formation, and the dermis cheek on the side of the ferry boat wall was worn away by the wild world. Chen Pingan kept his eyes closed, sitting in the air, with one hand on his abdomen, palm facing up, one hand clenched on his knee, his bones trembled with golden stones, and a golden fire flowed out. Mr. Sanshan Joho, the abbot of the Grand Formation, was a little relieved, and constantly adjusted the many subtleties of the Grand Formation. He was no longer as constrained as before, and was able to exert the power of this stacked formation to a greater extent. Because the young hidden officer made an unexpected move, his real body is like a mountain, although his soul is like 1,000 flowers in the mountain burning together, turning into a mighty stream of fire flowing to the foot of the mountain. But fortunately these separate streams, except for deep pools and pools of water formed at the foot of the mountain, and then converged into a river around the mountain, and then a small half of the creeks with dry waterbeds showed a tendency to climb the mountain, and they began to go upstream and return to the major, Qi palaces, in the mountain. In the end, this fiery person forms a self-circulation that tends to stabilize and become orderly. The 72 waiting formations, one of the stacked formations, were also overwhelmed, and the 72 seals that were the pivot of the formation were broken one after another. The Taoist Chunyang held up a big sun with one hand, pushed it heavily, and then pressed his fingers together to make a sword art, commanding the long sword behind him. Lu Yen twisted his figure and then raised his arms, and directly dragged the rising sun to draw a huge arc, and threw it to the huge gap where the bird in the cage was crushed by the fairy. This magical power with both swordsmanship, the fire was just right, and I saw a brilliant sun rising into the sky, which evolved into a golden robe that was spread out on the way, and then a long sword rope, like being implicated. Thousands of scorching suns, layer upon layer, climbed high in turn, until the sky curtain turned into pieces of robes to block the signs of expanding the gap in the wild world. In order to match the heaven position of the great sun, Yu Xian rode the bright moon in the 2-meter formation to fall to the bottom. Lu Yan turned to look at Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan straightened his waist slightly, and said in his heart, "Don't worry." The hand of Lu Yan and Yu Xian alone is equivalent to pulling Qin Pingan's heavenly soul and earthly soul into a long straight line, like a single tree, supporting the crumbling cage. Jing Juzhong flicked his sleeves and condensed the originally broken glass pavilion into an unknown talisman that looked like a seal, and stuck it on the door that opened in the sky. At the same time, a sunken blood groove appeared on Qin Ping's forehead. Obviously, Jing Juzhong is the ally who doesn't care whether Qin Pingan is okay or not. Li Shixing put his fingers together, moved his steps and volleyed in the air, and drew a talisman on the ground like a talisman to fill a gap. The blood groove on Qin Ping's forehead dissipated instantly. It seems that she had been secretly instructed by Mr. Sanshan Joho. Bai Jing hesitated for a while, glanced at the mountain master, who nodded slightly, and she stepped on the virtual phase leap moon in the stacked formation, and sacrificed a sword towards the heights. Thousands of sword lights like rainbows, soaring into the sky, like countless electric lights connecting two seas of clouds, sword lights scurrying in the cage like lightning snakes, and at the same time in the wild world above hundreds of miles make a thunder pool, and slowly push the bow side of the boat towards the road created by the talisman. Probably for some great monks looking up at the sky in the wild world, it is a celestial robbery who wants to ascend into the sky. Qin Pingan twisted his wrist slightly, took out the two talismans from his sleeves, and merged them into the backs of his left and right hands. It stands to reason that Qin Pingan can at least insist on half a stick of incense for short and 1 stick of incense for long. Xiao Mo couldn't stop it, and Bai Jing also appeared in a trance for a moment. Looking at his posture, his own Qin Shanju wanted to jump over the wall in a hurry. I saw the right hand that was clenching a fist against the knee, released it gently, and held the hilt of the sword with 5 fingers. The left hand, which is attached to the abdomen, with the palm facing upwards, is flipped, which is also a virtual grip, but it is holding the sword edge and slowly moves from right to left. A grain of pure golden light blooms between heaven and earth. Not only did more than 700,000 long swords in the cage vibrate in unison. Even the magic sword of Taoist Chunyang, which was turned into a long rope to hold the sun, shook to a certain extent, and trembled loudly if it met fellow Taoists. The wandering electric snake that Bai Jing Jingguang transformed into hanging between heaven and earth, like a mountain tree being blown by the wind, fell neatly to one side. Half of the great wall of sword chi, with a sword in his hand. Far away in the sky, a young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown shrank his shoulders, stretched out his palm, and touched his neck. At this moment, Li Xing took the lead in squinting and looking into the distance. After a while, a slender black line winds up, and under the black line is a fiery red road. Lu Chen, who was sneakily hiding in the sky of his home to watch the excitement, suddenly widened his eyes and slapped his fists. It's better to come early than to come by chance, feast for the eyes. Seeing that the opportunity was not good, the nameless man immediately reached out and grabbed Li Jiu's shoulder beside him. Yu Xian said solemnly, "It seems to be the ancient scorpion that wandered the depths of Taishu." Jing Juzhong spoke with Li Sheng and Mr. Sanshan Joho. Li Sheng nodded lightly. Although Mr. Sanshan Joho had a puzzled look on his face, he still ordered the talisman woman to return to his sleeve. In the blink of an eye, this ancient serpent showed its enormous size. The whole wild world is as small as a bead, and it was swallowed by its mouth, and its head shook a little, and it knocked the stack away, and its huge body crushed the brand new road that the rune had painstakingly paved. The bead was spit out, and the head was used again, and the wild world was replaced by a new green way that seemed to be preset, and the snake figure disappeared into the void and disappeared. Just now, I could vaguely see that above the snake's head, there was a Lu Fian with only skin left and no consciousness. On the road where the snake walked, the thick Dao marks burned by the fire persisted for a long time. Lu Yan shrank the mountains and rivers, walked to the side of the road in one step, crouched down, twisted a little ashes with his fingers. The Taoist real person with the Taoist name, Chunyang, couldn't help sighing, looked up into the distance. Even, Tao, can it be burned? Chen Pingon fell to the ground after being hit, and rolled all the way. The long sword in his left hand that was about to take shape gradually dissipated, and finally his right hand supported the ground and vomited blood. Li Shixing sighed. Today is only a temporary solution to the urgent need, and every 10 years in the future, there will be a collision between the two worlds that are pulling each other. If the ancient snake does not come to disrupt the situation, Li Sheng may be able to complete his work in one battle. Of course, it may also suffer heavy casualties in the world. Just because there are too many unknown variables, any deduction is meaningless. Mr. Sanshan Joho returned the array to Chen Pingon. The stacked formation turned into 2 flying swords, Bird in the Cage and Ueguchi, and instantly disappeared into Chen Pingon's eyebrows. Li Sheng looked as usual, and bowed his thanks to everyone. You have worked hard. After all, it took 10 more years. Except for Mr. Sanshan Joho, who remained motionless, the rest of the monks returned their salutes. And Chen Pingon wanted to stand up. Li Sheng stretched out his hand and pressed it, and said with a smile, "Take care of your injuries." Xiao Mo came to Chen Pingon's side and supported his son. Chen Pingon stretched out his hand to wipe off the blood on his face, but fortunately, he didn't fall down again. Mr. Sanshan Joho frowned slightly and asked in his heart, "Chen Pingon, why did you use those 2 talismans in advance?" Chen Pingon remained silent. Xingju felt regretful. If Chen Pingon resolutely slashed into the wilderness, Xingjuzhong would definitely be the first to keep up, adding fuel to the fire. Presumably that Xiao Mo and Bai Jing, the 2 Ascension Realm sword cultivators, will not be idle, and they are the icing on the cake. Li Shixing will be forced to protect Chen Pingon, and Chunyang Lu Yan will also use his sword to stop Bai Zhe or the Wild Sundial. Seeing the 2 sides of the confrontation, who didn't answer a question, Yu Xian couldn't help feeling that it was nice to be young. Li Xing smiled and patted the young cultivator's arm, and said, "Put yourself in the place, and am not used to anyone." In a gap in Taishu that looked like a vortex of a long river of time, Li Jiu, a famously paralyzed face, couldn't help but laugh. It turned out that Anonymous was burned by an inexplicably forked fire path, and the short man, who couldn't escape, shook his head, and tufts of charred hair fell. Li Go held back his laughter, raised his chin, and asked curiously, "Who did you provoke before?" "Don't dare to call him by his first name." Anonymous said depressedly, "How is it possible? I have only seen each other a few times from a distance, and it is too late to hide. How dare I take the initiative to provoke?" In the latter part of the ancient years, and before the battle to ascend to the sky, who would dare to provoke those supreme gods in the heaven except for those among the top 10 in the world? Li Xing took the lead to leave, as if to chase the Taiku snake controlled by the puppet Lu Fian. Li Zixingguang asked the city lord of Baidi City, who was very relaxed from beginning to end, and asked with a smile, "Mr. Zheng, it's better to hit the sun and play chess." Zheng Juzhong smiled and said, "It's better to wait until the debate between the 3 religions is over. Then I will welcome Headmaster Ko in Baidi City. The 2 sides are playing chess now, no matter how many games it is. After all, it will be impossible to win." Li Shixing nodded and said, "It's better to be respectful than to obey. The real person is mysterious with all directions, and I have never seen any traces of it." You must know that this compliment was spoken by Lu Qin himself. Yu Xian glanced at Jing Juzhong out of the corner of his eye. The old man twitched his beard and said nothing. "It's strange, how can you 2 have personal grudges? There is only one attitude towards Jing Juzhong and Yu Xian, and he keeps it at a distance. Just be friends, let alone enemies." Afterwards, Li Shixing walked with Mr. Sanshan Jiuho and traveled back to the source along the green road where the big demon first ascended. Yu Xian invited fellow Daoist Chunyang to go to the place where he joined the Dao for a drink. Because Yu Xian was busy joining the road in the outer galaxy before, it was rare for Mr. Sanshan Jiuho to take the initiative to show up. Therefore, Yu Xian knew a new palm story, and after thousands of years, he would take it out to bask in the sun, which is the kind of old story that is talked about with great interest. The previous 5 sword cultivators of the Great Wall of Sword Chi crossed the mountains and rivers in the wild world with the 3 mountain talismans in hand. Because after Chen Pingan and the others burned incense to respect, it didn't take long for another green smoke to rise up in front of Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. The second group of people, the number of people who worship the incense is not too many, only 9 people. But the incense is equally prosperous and the atmosphere is great. Chao Xiai. Yuan Yu. The 2 direct disciples of Jing Juzhong in Beta Sheng opened the door and closed the door. Fu Su and Gu Chunqing, a girl from the line of Tianqing Divine Mountain in Zhuhai Cave, a Taoist priest from Tianshifu in Longhu Mountain, a monk from Pashan Temple in Zhongtu, Su Bai, who was born in the line of the ancestral family of the military family. In short, Confucianism, Taoism and militarism, the 3 religions have all. In such a short period of time, there have been 2 groups of people holding the 3 mountain talismans across the mountains and rivers to return the salute, and they are still very young, not ordinary young people. So even Mr. Sanshan Jiuho was a little surprised, and there was a rare smile on his face. Unlike many great monks, what he values is the future, and the future of others. If we talk about the past, the prosperous years, after all, are the old yellow calendar. In the future, there are infinite possibilities. Like a book, it always takes a plot twist that surprises the viewer. And the content that has been thoroughly familiar in the front, no matter how amazing people and things are, at most, you can go back and read it a few times, but memories and nostalgia are easy to make people in the book feel sad. Some things can be said or not. At that time, Yu Xian and Chen Pingan, a young man, actually had no friendship at all. Just because in the Jinjiazu battlefield, Chen Pingan's pioneering disciple Jing Qian, the little girl who is resolute in her work and treats people with sincerity, impressed the old real person very well, and by the way, she went to the young hidden official who had never been masked. The look and feel is good. What kind of master brings out what kind of apprentice? That's why Yu Xiankai said with a very meaningful smile that he had to pay tribute to the incense twice, thanks to that fellow Qin Shaodao. At that time, the young cultivator hesitated for a while, but nodded. It is a reluctance to agree with Yu Xian's statement. It's not that this Mr. 3 Mountains and 9 Hours thinks too much of himself and is stingy with good words, but because Yu Xian told him a heartfelt word before. Therefore, his nodding was equivalent to being forced to give an answer. It turned out that Yu Xian had asked about it before. Was it because Zhilan was in power and had to get rid of it? After that, in order to mend the land shortage of Tongya continent, Chen Pingan borrowed landscapes from the princes, as if, I am the host. The nod of Mr. Sanshan Jiuho in the outer Xinghe, Chen Pingan is equal to a legitimate will, just like a local official who is a senior official in the frontier, gets an official document issued by the court and does things logically. Of course, Mr. Sanshan Jiuho didn't nod, and Chen Pingan could still make up for the lack of ground, but the final effect would not be so good. This kind of opportunity to enjoy the scenery outside is really rare, so Chen Pingan took Xiaomo and Bai Jing back to Haoran slowly. And Chen Pingan's heart that has not been recovered, saw a scene after going against the current with the sword holder for thousands of years. Let Chen Pingan go for a long time and be dazed. The setting sun melts gold, and the twilight clouds blend together. On a mountaintop, the night was dark, and there was a bonfire around. In addition to the world's top 10 and 4 candidates, there are many figures. Sword of Coming Chapter 1006. Chen Pingon asked, what was the specific situation in the depths of the Yuzhou earth vessel? Bai Jing has returned to the appearance of a girl with a sable hat, and he answered nonchalantly, you know the general reason and process of the fire and water dispute back then? Chen Pingon said, I have only heard some rough inside stories, most of which are fragmentary words, and barely know a few important points. That truly earth-shattering battle of water and fire was of course the most important fuse. Because the incense offered by spiritual beings can temper the golden body of the gods, resulting in the two gods who are also ranked among the top 5. Unprecedented road battle. According to Qing Tong, the result of that fight was that the pillar of the sky is broken and the earth is maintained, and the entire heavenly way is tilted accordingly, which in turn makes the moving trajectories of the sun, moon, and stars more and more obvious, and this leads to the future generations. Many channels. At the same time, countless gods who participated in the war fell to the earth like meteors, and the fires in Prairie were all over the place. This is not only the catastrophe of all sentient beings on the earth, but also the second big opportunity for Taoist priests after skills fall like rain. Bai Jing obviously didn't believe this rhetoric, glanced at the young mountain master, and said with a smile, is this really the case? Chen Pingon smiled and said, allow me to take a breath and take a break before rushing. The wind outside the sky greatly consumes the mind and aura of the Qi practitioners. Originally, the earth immortal practitioners were like drowning. Fortunately, this vast expanse is too vast, and there are still some scattered and overflowing spiritual Qi tides for Chen Pingon to absorb. However, at the current speed of Chen Pingon, if he wants to return to the vast world, it is estimated that he will have enough energy, and on the premise that his own spiritual Qi reserves are sufficient. But also to spend a month's time. Therefore, when Chen Pingon can adjust the 5 elements of life and disordered spiritual energy in his body, he still needs Bai Jing to clear the way and Xiao Mo to help. The 3 sword cultivators stood upright, and Bai Jing couldn't look down on the tide of spiritual energy around them, as if he could only catch a few small fish at a time by casting a net. Bai Jing said with a smile, this time, I was personally invited by the little master to go to the outer world. The mountain owner did not benefit much and contributed a lot. Chen Pingon said modestly, there is no credit, only a little hard work, not worth mentioning. Bai Jing asked tentatively, do you really want to pay back the 600 gold and copper coins that Jing Juzhong and Fu Lu Yushuan borrowed from Bai Desheng? Xiao Mo rubbed his brows when he heard the words. Chen Pingon said angrily, it's only right and proper to pay back the debt. There is no reason to borrow money and not pay it back. Bai Jing quickly saw the wind and turned the rudder, yes, it's not difficult to borrow and borrow again, that's the reason. Originally, she wanted to have a kind word with Lord Qin Shan. The city lord of Baidi City, at first glance, is a very difficult owner. The money must be paid back. There is no written receipt, and I will wait for him to join the 14th realm later. After entering the 14th realm, do you still have the face to ask Chen Pingon for money? After a few more years, maybe it can be converted into Guyu money. There is still a surplus of 300 gold and copper coins in Luopao Shangquan Mansion, and I will return it to the old immortal. If you are willing to run errands with this huge sum of money, I will thank you here first. With such a huge sum of money, Chen Pingon was really worried about sending it to Taofu Mountain filling Gold Peak through Feijin. The dojo is located in Fuliyukshuan on the golden-filled peak. The old real person is the founder of Taofu Mountain. This mountain is currently the only mountain in the world that has authentic, upper and lower sects at the same time. There are always some Yi Xiao who are full and supportive, and like the idea of passing the letter Feijin. In history, there are many cross-continental flying swords carrying important secret treasures and letters. Bai Jing asked, the mountain master can rest assured that I will travel to Middle-earth alone. Aren't you afraid that I will raise a flag of Luopa Mountain, Fox fake tiger power, and cause trouble outside? Chen Pingon smiled and said, just look at what Miss Xie did when she entered Luzhou from Beiju and traveled across the continent to Luopao Mountain. You can rest assured. Bai Jing glanced at Xiao Mo. If Xiao Mo was willing to travel to China, she wouldn't mind taking a long trip, drinking a little wine on the way. Drunk, wine is a color medium, hee. Xiao Mo said, now that the young master is injured, I will not leave the Dali realm without authorization. Chen Pingon suddenly asked, in the area of the Qingdao track where the stacked formation just now is, how much of the surrounding aura tide is left? Bai Jing was immediately stunned. No wonder Chen Pingon was so crawling and swaying in the wind. Did he have a plan to return to the carbine? Just wait for Li Sheng and the others to leave, then go to clean up the battlefield and clean up the mess. Xiao Mo gave a rough answer. Getting together is equivalent to a fairy's spiritual energy reserve. Bai Jing rubbed his hands together and smiled. I'm afraid that the old woman who is proficient in this way will return and she will be the first to climb up. Mountain Master, if you want to go, let's hurry up. Chen Pingon nodded, his body transformed into 18 white rainbow sword lights, and he turned back the same way. Bai Jing snorted and clicked his tongue, not looking like he was injured at all. On the way to control the sword, Bai Jing couldn't help but ask in his heart, Xiao Mo, what did your son see before, so angry that he almost couldn't hold back his sword and slashed into the wilderness? In the wild land, a fake Zhong Yuan appeared. Who? Zhong Yuan, he is the most powerful sword cultivator on the Great Wall of Sword Qi after the eldest sword immortal. If he hadn't died in battle, Zhong Yuan would have been a pure sword cultivator in the 14th realm. The young master guessed that the original battle was the ultimate goal of the Wild Demon clan. There is only one, kill Zhong Yuan to prevent the appearance of the second 14th realm on the Great Wall of Sword Qi. When Zhong Yuan was alive, his reputation was very good, and the son admired the senior very much. Fengshua Temple Sword Immortal Wei and Jin received a sword manual that was given by Qin Qingdu and passed down from Zhong Yuan, and Wei Jin, who was regarded as the best candidate to inherit Zhong Yuan's swordsmanship by the boss sword immortal, was unable to. The favor of those few strands of ancient sword intent lies in the young demon sword cultivator, one of the 100 sword immortals in Tuyu Mountain. When practicing swords in the city, Jian Xiu used Lu Fian, or the water taught by Zhou privately. The moon view and the white bone view, trying to imitate a brand new sword Xiu Zhong Yuan. However, because of the words of the boss, Jian Xian, and the fact that Wei and Jin had enough swordsmanship, the Wild World and the Great Wall of Sword Qi each had their own gains. Zhou still succeeded in his calculations, and he was done, and the world saw Zhong Yuan again. Wei Jin inherited the 4 sword intents left by Zhong Yuan, and only said that the ancestors in Feishing City had a genealogy, and Wei Jin belonged to Zhong Yuan's line of sword cultivators. Really starving to death, timid, daring to die. The savage old woman with a cane was really hit by Bai Jing. When Chen Pingon and the others rushed to the old track of Qingdao, the old woman was swallowing the tide of spiritual energy. Breaking down the unique Taoist meaning of the Qingdao, a little spiritual energy is just a bonus, and the latter is the key to the old woman's return to the outer world at risk. Bai Jing didn't say a word, just slashed out with a sword, and the dark sky was instantly torn out into a long snow-white line. Perhaps this was the way the ancient demons greeted each other. Guan Yi appeared out of thin air, stood in front of the old woman, stretched out his hand and grabbed the white thread. His palm shook, the white thread of the sword light wrapped around her entire arm, the electric light bloomed, and there was a sound, and finally the sword light smashed Guan Yi's body. A snow-white arm, but Guan Yi's shoulder moved slightly, and she gave birth to a complete arm. Bai Jing wondered, Guan Yi, in order to help her get this spiritual energy and moral meaning, you are an outsider, you can't commit revenge against me, right? Are your brains growing on your chest? Guan Yi smiled bitterly and said, if I ask for something, I have to help. Any cultivator with a little brain would not want to get entangled with things like Bai Jing. Bai Jing stretched out a palm and hooked his fingers. It's a matter of fact, it's easy to discuss. Without any hesitation, Guan Yi threw an ancient tree branch with green buds at Bai Jing, which was the bankruptcy of wealth and disaster. The old woman's figure dissipated, and Guan Yi disappeared with it. Xiao Mo turned his head to look down at a place, and Chen Pingan shook his head and said, forget it, the other party came prepared, and it is not appropriate to pursue and kill him. Bai Jing looked around and said, it's just the leftovers, there's not much spiritual energy left. Chen Pingan said, mosquito legs are also meat, so I have the help of Miss Lao Xia, how much can be recovered? Bai Jing was reluctant, but just remembered that she had just obtained a treasure, and changed her face to a bright smile. She raised one arm, like a flag, and shook it vigorously for a few times, and the spiritual energy came frantically. Chen Pingan estimated that this income is equivalent to the wealth of a cultivator of the jade purity realm. These auras are put into the lotus flower blessed land and scattered into the heaven and the earth. It may not be particularly significant for the entire blessed land. A certain dojo immortal mansion, such as Jiajin's Hushan School, a certain day's Shanjun mansion, or a gift to the Taisheng Huang of Nanyuan Kingdom who was transferred to the mountain to practice, is a large sum of money. As for the 3 waves of spiritual energy that had been drawn through the stacking formation, Chen Pingan planned to take one from Luopao Mountain in Qingping Sword Sect, and put the last one into Changchundongtian Qisong Mountain on Mishua Peak. Bai Jing condensed this spiritual energy into a bead the size of a green apricot, and threw it to Chen Pingan. It wasn't a waste of time. Chen Pingan put it in his sleeve. The Taoist meaning of Qing Dao's trajectory is naturally more rare than the spiritual beads that are usually condensed into real objects by the great monks. They returned to Howren in the wind again, and Chen Pingan asked casually, Miss Xia, where did that branch come from? Bai Jing laughed and said, God knows where Guan Yi's mother-in-law picked it up. It's not worth a lot of money. Chen Pingan imitated Bai Jing, stretched out a palm and hooked it. According to the agreement, sit on the ground and divide the spoils. Bai Jing, who was thinking about how to get through the barriers, had to raise his sleeves high, and finally stretched out his hand and took out 3 green beads as big as a fist. Putting them together, they weighed their palms lightly, turned to look at Bai Jing, and said with a smile, I heard Xiao Mo mention that Miss Xia is in Shijingshan City on Beiju Luzhou, and she often sets up a stall to do business. It's a pity. It's just that every time the business is not very prosperous and you can't earn a few coins, it's not because of the lack of genes and liang, right? It was rare for Xiao Mo to help Bai Jing to say a fair word. Sir, Bai Jing didn't deduct a few pounds privately, which is equivalent to the spiritual energy savings of 2 ordinary Ascension Realm cultivators. From this, it can be seen that Chen Pingan's hard-earned spiritual qi tied through a stacked formation is not as good as Bai Jing's casual sacrifice of a few magic weapons. Chen Pingan's face was full of surprise. If you agree to split the account by 5 or 5, it will be split between 5 and 5. I never thought of thanking the girl for her burden of fasting, but it is still the way to treat people with sincerity and sincerity. Bai Jing rubbed the sable hat. She was moved. Xiao Mo Jiner turned his elbow towards her. In fact, Chen Pingan deliberately asked this question, which is equivalent to giving Xiao Mo a favor. Chen Pingan throws the pole, Xiao Mo takes the bait, and Xiego bites the bait. Everyone is happy. Chen Pingan overlooked a magnificent world. In addition to the cycle of the sun and the moon, there are still 5 auxiliary stars. Among them, there is the bright red Yinghua star. The number of paths is the most uncertain. The sun and the moon are added with 5 stars, and the light shines on the world, so they are collectively called the 7 luminaries. Among them, the wood is called suashing, which is the largest in size. It takes 12 years to revolve around it once. It is the same as the earthly branch, hence the name sway. After a total beheading, the first ancestor of the military family was imprisoned in the star that symbolized the killing. Since ancient times, the intricate records of the Qin Tianjian of various dynasties and generations, about all kinds of terrifying and suspicious celestial phenomena, many related to this star. Every time there is a celestial astronomy that confuses and guards the heart, it is an invisible big test for the secular monarch in the world. Chen Pingan said, "Miss Xia digressed earlier, let's continue talking." According to the news from the Shuixi side of the Changchun Palace, in the depths of the Yuzhou earth vessel, the remaining 6 monks from the Dali earth branch should meet with Bai Jing. Foreshadowing, how can it be considered a digression? Bai Jing smiled and defended herself, and then she took out a thick stack of paper from her sleeve. The paper was extremely thin, so there were a lot of them. The contents of the pictures were scenes from ancient times, and each page could be described as an isolated copy. If it were compiled into a book, and the pages were quickly turned, it would look like a little book sold by a market bookstore to children. Bai Jing threw it to Chen Pingan and said, "Declare in advance, it's just for borrowing." Chen Pingan took over the stack of papers with many visions of heaven and earth, and smiled for no reason. In fact, it is more like the textbooks when Xiao Haidun went to school to study. In the margins of each page, he drew a little man. The old cook once stole a book, as evidence of Pei Qian's hard work, and replaced it with another book, and also intentionally drew some identical little people. It's just that Pei Qian has a lot of finesse, and for some reason she found something wrong. At that time, she was so anxious that she would be seen by Master accidentally. As a result, Pei Qian rummaged through the box and couldn't find the runaway book. She suspected that a thief had committed the crime, so she lightly grabbed the ear of the right guardian of Qilong Lane with one hand, and stepped on the tail of the left guardian of Kolongxiang with one foot, asking the two of them to quickly confess and be lenient. Chen Pingan first glanced at all the pages that were quickly flipping in his hands, and then read it again from the beginning. This time it was slow. One of the pages has 2 blank spaces, which are located in the northwest and southeast of the page, one of which is burning like a fire, and the other is soaked with water. In the previous chat with Qing Tong, Chen Pingan used a very rustic but extremely appropriate metaphor at that time, just like the burning and turning of the soil in the fields of later generations, so that the earth, through the infusion of rich and abundant spiritual energy, has changed from a barren land to a barren land. Fertile land. Because the corpses of many gods scattered all over the place themselves have become the source of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. When a big year is encountered, the year is good, and there is a big harvest. Countless cultivators have been in it, and each has the opportunity to occupy the treasures of feng shui, and they have opened up dojos one after another to gather the treasures of heaven and earth. On the earth, there are bare, Taoist veins everywhere. It is only because of the innumerable books that were originally hidden, such as Lei Han, because of the golden fragments of many fallen gods in the 2 divisions of Tianting, water and fire, and at the same time, the extremely powerful generals of the Leibu divisions. It is no exaggeration to say that, in the years when geniuses were born in large numbers and Taoist priests were springing up like bamboo shoots after a rain, the opportunities on the ground were simply, just pick it up, not take your neighbors. Bai Jing sighed endlessly. When the battle to ascend to the sky is over, the cultivators in the world will finally turn their backs on the guest. And then there's the infighting that split into 2 camps. The losing side is miserable, no one has good fruit to eat. Why did she and Xiao Mo, the big monsters, sleep for thousands of years? Not just because they lost that fight, and they had to hide and recover. But the worst, of course, is the first ancestor of the military family who was the leader of the party. Originally, he could directly establish a religion and call himself the ancestor. At the beginning, the founders of the three religions, Confucianism, Buddhism and Taoism, had no objection to this, just because he wanted to occupy the ancient heavenly court ruins, and then the ending is that total beheading. However, Bai Jing still admires this person very much. Moreover, the ambition of the first ancestor of the military family was very ambitious, but he did not hide it. So this time Bai Jing seems to be stubborn, leaving the wilderness alone, looking for Xiao Mo to form a Taoist partner, of course, the main reason. In fact, Bai Jing also hides an unspeakable selfishness. If the first ancestor of the military family comes out again, if there is another similar battle, she must continue to count her. After that, the little master shot, Jedi Tiantong. But it has left an invisible gate, or a passage, for the monks in the world to enter the body. That is, in addition to refining the sun and the moon, Qi practitioners can also use their own numerology and magic techniques to pull the outer stars that are the corpses of gods floating in the sky, absorb the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth, and continue to grow the One in the world. Led by Taoist ancestors first, the patriarchs of the three sects are on the river bank. When the 10,000 years period was set, the Taoist ancestors saw this one early. After continuous expansion, the three of them, as monks of the 15 realms, will eventually appear in their respective worlds. Taoization. To be precise, it is an assimilation. After that, Li Xing teamed up with Bai Zhe, who betrayed the demon clan, and jointly cast Joding, and there is a mountain search map that can almost be said to be flooded in later generations. Later, I invited Mr. Sanshan Joho to come out and jointly formulate a new ceremony. Bai Jing turned his head to look into the vast depths of the sky, sighed, and said, "In the boundless sky, there are actually countless sun and moon suspended in the sky, and the same is true of Yinghua." Chen Pingan nodded. Bai Jing continued, "But it is also a member of the sun and the moon, and it is of high rank, just like there are as many subordinates in the Aquarius continent today. Only a very small number of people can become a frontier official. The big day that I have in mind is the one with a better background and higher rank. 10,000 years ago, I had my heart set on it and opened it up as a dojo. According to the rules of the year, it belongs to my private territory." Xiao Mo finally retorted, "Do you want to refine it into a life object?" Bai Jing's cultivation aptitude is so good that on the way of her cultivation, she has never been worried about being greedy in chewing. Half a day has the same effect, and then for the remaining half day, Bai Jing will not be idle, so he will go to learn to refine things like Lan Qi, or practice the sidelines of those ancient earth immortals who are trying to become one of them. Maybe the Xiego with the hippie smiling face in front of him is the one that Bai Jing deliberately stripped away. Scum, the girl in the mink hat seems to be idle every day, not doing a proper job. Bai Jing laughed and said, "It's still Xiao Mo who understands me." Then she complained, "Xiao Mo, don't interrupt. The great sun that I have chosen from thousands of times in this round will have the opportunity to become a golden crow. Even if I don't eat it, I will keep it as a pet by my side, like the white deer that Wang Youwu rides. Isn't it born out of a bright moon?" After practicing, it is also very good to amuse Lizzie to relieve boredom. It's a pity that people are not as good as heaven. I have been practicing Taoism there for hundreds of years, and it is still given the civil war spread to the field, and the majestic Dao Qi caused by Dao Zui's sleeve hit him far away, and he fell to the ground with a snap. Fortunately, I gritted my teeth, braved my courage, and gave my life to protect the road. I Ching saved me from falling apart. I made an appointment with it early, and we will meet again in the future. Lord Chen Shan, you are a scholar, come to help judge, and in good conscience, who belongs to this round of great sun. Why are you robbing me? You know, to bully a little girl who has left her hometown, is weak, and can't help herself, so embarrassing. Chen Pingan said, "Quality is better than literature and literature is better than quality." History is gentle, and then a gentleman. The girl in the mink hat looked confused. What do you mean? Are you complimenting people? Seeing that she was pretending to be stupid, Chamois helped to explain. Young master is persuading you to stop talking nonsense, refine your words, and say more serious things. Chen Pingon smiled and said, you misunderstood, it's actually self-reflection. Bai Jing nodded vigorously, I know, it's the custom of your Huaiwang County. When you scold others, scold yourself first, and you win half the fight. Chen Pingon ignored her sarcasm and said, don't digress, how do you deal with that big sun? Bai Jing said, what else can I do, learn from Master Qin, and make money with peace, laugh when I go out, don't reach out and slap the smiling person. It turned out that Bai Jing made a deal with Dolly Song, which she temporarily lent to the Dolly court. The ownership belongs to Bai Jing, and the right to use belongs to the Dolly Song family, which is put on hold in that new blessed land. However, she can open up a dojo in the big day, and any other monks are not allowed to interfere. And the lease term of this dojo is 1,000 years, and the settlement is once every 100 years. For the first deposit and subsequent interest, the Dolly court needs to settle with a sum of gold and copper coins, which must be delivered to her on time. If she is not in Luopao Mountain, for example, if she has returned to the wilderness, Dolly Song also needs to find opportunities. Meet her in private, and don't overstay anyway, otherwise don't blame her for turning her face and not recognizing anyone. Chen Pingon said, if Miss Xia is not in Luopao Mountain, it's not the same as giving it to Xiaomo. What's your concern? Are you afraid that Xiaomo will be greedy for ink? Bai Jing snorted and said aggrieved, I'm not a Taoist companion, Wu Ming is indistinguishable, mixed up and taught people to read jokes. I'm not that kind of casual woman. Ignoring this, Chen Pingon pretended to be stunned, so, doesn't Miss Xia have a lot of money on hand, so she can take out 300 or 500 gold and copper coins casually? I'm coming. Bai Jing stretched out his hand and rubbed his mink hat, and began to play stupid, even whistling. As long as I am more shameless than Qin Shanju, you will have nothing to do with me, Qin Shanju. In fact, there was one thing that Bai Jing deliberately ignored, mainly because he was worried that Qin Shanju, who had a small stomach, would settle the account after Chioho. There is no need to repeat the past events, and there is no need to raise any waves anyway. It turned out that in the depths of the earth, as Bai Jing's reward for allowing Li Shixing to open the box, she put forward a condition at the time. Since she likes to take care of things so much, Bai Jing will let the young scholar who claims to be from across the world took her sword as light as a goose feather. The other party is really stupid, haha agreed. Not only that, the other party really took the sword unscathed. Although Bai Jing was worried that if he slashed with all his strength, the other party would be doomed, and she would have to be driven by Chen Pingon and Xiao Mo to drive her out of Luopa Mountain, but even if he did not use all his strength, a sword cultivator with a successful ascension realm would still be able to drive her out of Luopa Mountain. With a handy sword, a Qi trainer who is only half 100 years old, can he catch it? If you don't die, you have to lose half your life. Unexpectedly, he handed out a sword and saw that Li Shixing was still alive and kicking, which made Bai Jing greatly frustrated. How could he just bump into a young man casually? Could it be that her swordsmanship in the Ascension realm has become so worthless after 10,000 years? Or is it that the monks in the world today can easily obtain the true meaning of the word Wujing? So outside the sky, when she saw Li Zhou, who was about the same number as Li Shixing, she became angry. How could Bai Jing know the relationship between the young scholar he saw and the great headmaster of Bai Yujing? In the words of the most holy master, if Ko Ming was born in the ancient times, he would definitely be among the top 10 heroes of the ancient times. At least there is no suspense to find a candidate. The difference between the 10 heroes and the candidates actually does not only refer to the level of realm cultivation, but more to the degree of credit for opening up the road. Like Lan Qi, who created the art of refining things, she only talked about her ability to fight and fight. Although the magic weapons were piled up into mountains, she was actually not as good as those candidates. But that didn't stop her from becoming one of the most respected top 10. Chen Pingan asked, "Miss Xie, which way do you want to go?" Xie Go glanced at Xiao Mo. His face was full of resentment, and he was extremely aggrieved. "Do you also talk about this kind of thing? Who is his own and who is an outsider, can Xiao Mo not know?" Chen Pingan said to himself, "A sword light, infinitely small, is destined to be unable to find the smallest one that makes up the world. It is too difficult." Bai Yujing Lu Shen is a negative example, and he has not been able to find it so far. It is a path of 15 realms other than the establishment of a religion and the ancestor, so I think the pursuit is infinite, and the probability of success may be greater. I have to admit that, deep in Chen Pingan's heart, Lu Chen actually has a better chance of reaching the 15th realm than the really invincible one. After all, no one has dared to say that he has found the smallest of all things. Dao Ancestor may have found it, but Dao Kedao is very Dao, saying that he is not right. However, the pursuit of the infinitely vast world seems to be empty, but it is still relatively simple, of course, only in relative terms. The two natal flying swords, Sparrow in the Cage and Ueguchi, are currently taking this road to improve their rank. As for whether they can open up a new path in the future and obtain some kind of brand new magical power, they can only take a step by step. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "And this kendo, which strives to be broad and immeasurable, is in line with Miss Xie's character." Xie Go hesitated for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Chen Pingan, you are still thinking too simply." How to say? Many years ago, I stepped into a great hall unintentionally, and saw that kind of imagination that was embodied. It was a strange realm that could not be described in words. As long as you dare to think, it seems that you can do anything. It can be realized, the real and the fake, the false and the real, it is completely reversed. No, it can't be said to be reversed, the real and the illusory have been confused, there is no boundary at all. I don't know how many earth immortals are trapped in it. A Taoist heart is like a deep quagmire that cannot be extricated, and gradually decays and dies. Hearing this, Xiaomo finally said, "It is said that only the Buddha can completely suppress this state, otherwise even the Taoist ancestors and the most holy teachers can only retreat." Alas, the Buddha is the only transcendental being who is truly free from all obstacles. Indeed, it cannot be more powerful. Xie Go looked envious, nodded vigorously and said, "It is said that the Buddha's Dharma is as numerous as the sand of the Ganges, and it can spread throughout the past, present, and future. No matter how powerful our swordsmanship is, we are incomparable." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Miss Xie, you don't seem to have said how you left that hall." Xie Go stretched out his hand and scratched his face, with a rare look of embarrassment. After that, Chen Pingan asked Xiaoma to help, and the speed of Yufeng skyrocketed. During the period, when he passed by Suixing, the strong turbulence and the majestic wind, I am afraid that the earth immortal cultivator will be dragged and torn into pieces if he is not careful, but it is an end. The perfect place for a martial artist to beat the body, the effect is good, just like beating the tide, but due to the rules of the Confucian temple, pure martial arts cannot be casually controlled by the wind and the sky. Presumably it has something to do with the first ancestor of the military family who sits in Yinghua. Just passing by this year's star, at this moment, Chen Pingan suddenly noticed a trace of breath, and immediately turned his head to look, and vaguely saw the slim figure of a man in a Confucian shirt. For a long time, I do not know who is playing the iron flute, and the clear sound breaks the sky. Chen Pingan immediately asked Xiao Mo to stop his sword and bow to the unknown Confucian sage. By the time Chen Pingan bowed to his feet, that figure had already dissipated in the wind whirlpool, and he had no intention of greeting them politely. After Chen Pingan and his party continued on their way, Li Xing appeared at the edge of a vortex in Suishing. There was a scholar sitting in the center of the vortex. There was a stone platform in front of him. 2 stacks of books were placed, divided into 9 and 14. The top 2 books were written Lixiazu and Zhuzhou respectively. When the scholar saw Li Xing, he didn't get up to greet him, but just called Li Xing little master. The scholar asked, "In the next 10 years, will you find a good helper?" Li Xing nodded and said, "Next time, there will be enough manpower, and you can call a group of young people." The scholar glanced into the distance and said, "The 10,000-year sentence is about to end." Li Xing said. Li Xing asked with a smile, "Have you met face to face?" The scholar nodded and said, "As expected, our close disciple of Wensheng's lineage has taken great pains to return to the sky to pick up leaks. It is indeed a good material for business." Li Xing said, "Fu Xing once proposed to let Qin Pingan secretly enter the Confucian temple and serve as the god of wealth for a period of time. He used his expertise to be responsible for allocating the materials of the entire vast world into the wild. He was only scolded by the old scholar before giving up. There are very few visitors here, and the only cheap practitioners outside Confucianism are Lu Kaishan of Aizhou, and the businessman Mr. Fan." Approaching Haoran, Xiago said casually, "Chen Shanju, the real person of Chunyang, those swordsmanships are shaking, they look quite good, who did you learn the skills from?" Chen Pingan said, "Senior Chunyang taught himself, and there is no teacher in the mountains." Xiago pouted, obviously not believing it, and asked again, "You seem to be very afraid of that surname Cheng." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "I advise you, one day, you will get rid of the relationship with Luopa Mountain. If Miss Xia can stay in the Haoran world and sway freely, whoever can provoke it, just don't provoke this Mr. Zheng." Xiago smiled and said, 14 realms, who would dare to provoke them?" Xiaomo said solemnly, "By Jing, even if Mr. Zheng is only in the Ascension realm, you can't arbitrarily provoke him." Xiago smiled sweetly, pretended to be shy and said, "Little Mo, I've changed my name, just call me Plum Blossom in the future." Ignoring the flirting of the 10,000-year-old friends, Chen Pingan suddenly said, "Let's take a detour, change to another sky gate, and take a trip to Middle-earth Divine Continent first." Xiaomo just nodded. Xiago rubbed his hands and said, "What are you doing?" "Smash the field." I remember the previous real person named Chunyang, who joined forces with Yu Xian, followed the vine and touched the melon, and fell a sword towards the Middle-earth Divine Continent. Could it be that you have to rush to the door to ask for an explanation? No overnight feud. Chen Shanju, your temper is so bad. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "What else can I do? I'm a little cheap practitioner in the nascent soul realm, I'm just a fox and a tiger." The sage who guards one of the heavenly curtains of the divine continent in the Middle Earth is a burly old man with big beard. Hearing that the group is going to enter the Middle Earth through this, he opened the door without saying anything. The young hidden officer clasped his fists in thanks, Xiao Mo followed, and Xiago even lifted up the skirt and gave him 1,000 blessings. The old man just felt awkward. That sable-cap girl was light on her feet. She is really virtuous, a lady of all, with such a good match. Xiao Mo is really lucky, she has. Yin Fu. After entering the gate, 3 dazzling sword lights all fell in a single line, heading straight for the Yin-Yang family Lu clan of the Middle-earth Divine Continent. 3 uninvited guests, 2 Ascension Realm sword cultivators, 1 peak and 1 consummation, the latter is already standing at the door. After all, it is only 1 step away from the 14th realm. Of course, Xiaomo also briefly entered this perfect situation. Chen Pingan and Xiaomo were both swooping upside down, but Xiago wrapped his arms around his chest, hugging the mink hat he just took off, and letting the wind blow. His hair was like an umbrella, revealing a smooth full forehead. Xiao Imo asked, "Young master, is there the Lu clan's formation below?" Chen Pingan squinted and smiled and said, "There is a burst and someone beat someone." Xiago grinned and said, Chen Shanju, I think you are more and more appetizing." Chen Pingan teased, "I'm a family man, Miss Xia. Please don't change your mind and teach Xiao Mo to be sad." Xiago scratched his face, "Xiao Mo, don't worry, I definitely won't. I swear I will love you for at least 10,000 years." Xiao Mo sternly turned a deaf ear. Probably because he was in a good mood, Xiago suddenly increased his speed and directly broke the large formation of the Lu family with his feet, and the sound of glass shattering resounded in the air. When Chen Pingan and Xiao Mo landed on the Sishiantai, the highest forbidden area of the Lu family, Xiago had already cut a hole in the Sishiantai, which had only half of it left, and the whole person was slanted and nailed into the ground. The sable-cap girl shook her shoulders, pulled her legs out of the ground one after another, and then with a hoot, she leaned back and fell to the ground. Chen Pingan's face was expressionless, and he had no reason to think of the touching porcelain on his way to the Mural City in his early years, and then looking at the thanking dog, his acting skills were also a bit clumsy. Dressed in a cyan robe, with his hands wrapped around his sleeves, he stood on half of the Sidian terrace, overlooking the Lu family, which was as large as a dynasty city. Xiao Mo with a yellow hat and blue shoes, holding a green bamboo stick, reminded Bai Jing to stop pretending, "Can you ask Lu Shi for a few medical bills?" Chen Pingan stretched out a hand pointed to a place near the Sishiantai. The security was heavily guarded. Xiago broke the formation one after another, and all the sword energy was blocked. Mostly it is the Jilan office. The ancestor of the Lu family was Taibu, one of the 6 officials of the Confucian Temple. One of the extremely important responsibilities of Confucianism as Taibu is to take care of the scriptures known as the ancestor of all scriptures. In addition, there are 2 secret auxiliary scriptures. One is placed in the Lintai of Gongdalin, and Jingsheng Shiping is responsible for daily care. Another great scripture, the first engraved and first edition, was hidden in the Jilan office of the Lu clan of the Yinyang family. With this scripture, the Lu clan, who Zhou Zi talks about the sky, Lu Shi talks about the earth, was able to derive an important branch. A piece of ground mirror. And because of this book from the ground, the masters of the Lu clan took a different path, which is different from the theory of the 5 elements and the mutual restraint proposed by Zhou Zi. Starting with the Zhen hexagram, the fortune-telling of human beings is like a mountain, and the immortal Lu Wei, who has been hiding in the Lizhu cave for many years, can only helping the family to investigate the secrets of the 3 yuan, 9 fortune, and Liujia value symbols, and draw up a complete map with Chen Pingan as the coordinates, and then a small group of Lu Sky Watchers and the Tiantai Sikhen Masters, with hidden identities. You can view Taoism through Chen Pingan's mountain route and growth trajectory. Lu Si Tiantai and Jilan office complement each other. Xiao Mo smiled and said, "I don't know if that Senior Lu will show up tonight." Chen Pingan said, "In our own territory, I have the courage to come here to meet 2 old friends. We must be more reluctant to see you than me, Senior Lu." Indeed, Lu Wei had suffered a lot in Xiao Mo's hands last time when he was reminiscing about the past in the capital palace of Doli. With Xiao Mo's one-handed swordsmanship, it spread all over the capital like a snow-white spider web, and then he explored the barrier method, and successfully pulled out Lu Wei, who had escaped from the ground, grabbed his neck, and put him back on the table. Lu Wei was also cut off by Xiao Mo's head, and he just put it on the table. After that, Chen Pingan had the opportunity to shake his hand, trapping Lu Wei's soul, and the immortal was forced to condense his mind into 1 grain, and saw a lot of bizarre scrolls of time. In the end, he couldn't stand the torment and completely lost his mind. Lu Wei's almost flawless Dao heart collapsed, and the immortal who was expected to enter the Ascension realm fell to Yupu. Xiao Mo said, "It seems that the Lu family has removed a few attack formations." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Otherwise, do you want the Yin Yang family seniors like Lu Wei to start a confrontation with you?" Xiao Mo smiled knowingly. "That's right, that Lu Wei is a paper fairy, whose physique is unbelievably weak, and is really vulnerable." 5 people walked out from the Jilan office and stopped under the city terrace. This group of Lu clan cultivators had different appearances and the same temperament. This group of highly respected Lu clan masters stood in a row, but the heights were very different, and the unevenness was like a water pattern. The one in the middle is the highest in seniority and realm, with a youthful appearance. He is the current patriarch of the Lu family, Lu Xin, with a strange Taoist name, Heavenly Boundary. Among them is Lu Wei. There is also an imperceptible green line on the neck of this Lu Wei. Seeing the smiling blue-shirted swordsman again, Lu Wei seemed to have a calm expression, but in fact he had great hatred. He was almost imprisoned by this young hidden officer who hides a knife in a smile, and his soul was annihilated in the Thunder Bureau Purgatory, also known as the Heavenly Prison. Xiago sat on the ground, but it was a pity that the place was spotless, otherwise it would be even more pitiful if it was covered in dust. "If you don't pay 100 pieces of gold and copper coins, you can never send her away. She is not a beggar." Lu Xun raised his head and cupped his hands, and said indifferently, "The distinguished guest will come to the door, and you will be welcome." Chen Pingan didn't pay any attention to the Lu family's patriarch. He just shook his sleeves, and beside him was a demon monk, Yin Lu, the deputy city owner of Xianzhou City, and the beloved disciple of the big demon Xuanpu. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Yin Lu, you and Lu Daoyu, a rare old friend, don't even say hello." Before Lu Wei's mind, he once came to the door of a mansion that was not closed, and there was a guy sitting on the ground inside, writing a book with a pen, conscientiously. It was Yin Lu, the deputy city lord of the wild fairy hairpin city, who was detained by a young hidden officer. Enough for 1,000,000 words, and the quality of the content must be guaranteed, otherwise, you will never want to go out in this life. Therefore, during this period of time, this silver deer racked his brains to record all the anecdotes of his hometown and the world, and finally managed to collect 500,000 words. The deputy city lord couldn't help but sigh every day. Writing a book is really a difficult task. Yin Lu slapped his head in a stern manner. "Fellow Daoist Lu, we meet again." It was rare to come out to breathe, but it was like walking on thin ice. If Yin Lu guessed correctly, the old men of the Lu clan in the Howran Middle-earth were immortal. Lu Wei could only pretend to be deaf. You can't really communicate with that savage demon clan. Lu Wei was born in the Lu family's clan, and Lu Hui, a Confucian scholar who is one of the greatly earthly branch monks, is not a direct descendant of the Lu clan's Qingzhou, but the latter is different from the Empress Dowager Nanpin who learned the truth through the string of rhinoceros beads. Still kept in the dark. During the days of Lizhu Cave, Lu Wei bet on the Dali Song clan, especially the secret support of Chao Ran and Yuaning, who later became the Dali Zhongxing Shuangbi. So that Lu Wei received a large amount of dividends, and the bottleneck of the fairyland showed a sign of loosening. If he hadn't traveled to the capital of Dali, he had to be a lobbyist for Lu Jiang, and the boat capsized in the gutter accidentally, and the immortal Lu Wei the merits should have been completed, and he should return to the Lu clan in the Middle Earth and retreat to seek the Ascension realm. The ugliness of the family should not be made public. Lu Wei was in the Dali Palace at the time. Whether it was a long-standing depression in his heart, he did not vomit unhappily, or he had no intentions, he had vomited some bitterness with Chen Pingan. According to this immortal, the Lu family was really serious. It is too large, and there are constant disputes between the sect and several side branches, as well as within the sect. It's not just that kind of conflict of interests, but there are also many subtle differences on the road. Therefore, The results of the Lu family's ancestral hall discussions and those who leave the ancestral hall are often contradictory to outsiders who see flowers in the fog. Lu Xun, who seemed to be left to the side, looked calm, but continued to say to himself, "I want to ask Qin Shanju for advice. I don't know if that six-man thunder seal with upside-down characters came from the hands of a patriarch of my family. According to Lu's genealogy, an old man like Lu Wei would have to call Lu Qin his uncle." As a result, Lu Wei was detained by such a seal, which was most likely made by Lu Qin himself, and almost lost his soul. Chen Pingon asked knowingly, "A certain patriarch? The Lu family tree is so thick. As an outsider who is a guest of the Lu family for the first time, how do I know which patriarch Lu is talking about?" One of the young women standing beside the juvenile, in a middle-aged manner, she actually laughed out loud. Even though she was of the same clan with the same surname, she really didn't give any face to the head of the family, Lu Xun. From this, it can be seen that there are many hills within the Lu clan of the Yinyang family, each forming a formation, which is not a false statement. And she is indeed qualified to not sell face to Lu Xun, because Lu has a line of Taoism, and its importance is not inferior to that of the Sky Watchers. It is responsible for assisting Fengdu, ensuring that people and ghosts in the world have different paths, and that there are different paths. Therefore, the land officials of the Lu family in this vein are very in love with Fengdu and the Temple of Heaven's God. And she happens to be the ancestor of this lineage. Lu Xun took the initiative to speak twice, but Chen Pingon ignored it. The sable-cap girl sitting on the ground deliberately added fuel to the jealousy. "Can you bear this, old man? They all say that hitting people is not slapping in the face, and being so bullied by a young junior, you must not roll up your sleeves and fight hard." Xiago cried out again and again, only to remember that she was still seriously injured. She reached out and rubbed her knee, and immediately shuddered, shouting that it was in pain, and she was limping. A tall and thin old man with a clear appearance, his heart is full of resentment. When did my Lu family's ancestral land fall to the point of being plagued by outsiders and wild? That is, the leader of the Confucian temple, offering wine, and coming to my Lu family as a guest, different from the need to abide by the etiquette everywhere, the respect that should be given, not lacking at all. Chen Pingon moved to the edge of the sitting terrace, stomped his feet lightly, stomped half a brick to the ground, and stared at the Lu family's patriarch. "If it weren't for my friend Lu Tai, I would definitely visit the Zhilan office today and borrow it from you. It takes a few books to walk before leaving." Last time, Chen Pingon reminded Lu Wei, "Remember to send a message to Lu clan in Middle-earth, and don't make Dali's idea in the future." He also told Lu Wei that he completely opened the skylight. "Your appearance, Lu Wei, is equivalent to Lu's taking the lead and asking about the sword, while Chen Pingon and Luo Pashan have officially led the sword. For the monks on the mountain, this is actually a complete tear in the face." I heard an outsider mention Lu Taiwan. Several old people looked unhappy. Just because Lu Tai, a rebellious and unfilial descendant from a clan, almost brought disaster to the entire family. As a result, an ancient well that seemed to hang upside down appeared over the entire Sishiantai. The well was facing down, blocking the sky and the sun. Of all the sky watchers gathered at the Sishiantai at that time, there were only 3 who fell on the spot. And the rarity of each Lu sky watcher is completely unimaginable to the outside world. If it wasn't for the beginning of the vision of heaven and earth, the patriarch Lu Xun immediately used the 2 heavy treasures enshrined in the ancestral hall to block the fall of the deep well. I am afraid that including the Si Tiantai, there is absolutely no turbidity. The Zhilan department will be affected. As if his scar had been exposed, the tall and thin old man couldn't help but sternly reprimanded. Shu Zi became famous, so bold, how dare he make a big deal here? Xiago jumped up, "Old thief, who borrowed your courage to dare to be so shameless to the son of my little Amo?" In an instant, Lucian rolled up his sleeves and drew a circle in front of him, and a brilliant gossip mirror appeared in the air. A snow-white sword light instantly hit the gossip picture, the flames splashed everywhere, a crack gradually appeared in the gossip mirror, and the cracking sound of the mirror's surface became louder and louder. At the door of Gilon's office, a lazy young man stepped out from among the painted door gods, and rubbed his eyes as if he had not woken up. As a result, Xiago held a sword through his abdomen and nailed it into the door. Xiago was held back by the backhand of the young man, who let the long sword lazily cut his body, turned and pressed it on the door. The girl grinned. The young man seemed to have succeeded, but suddenly his body flew backwards and swept away, with his fingers close together to make a move, and a group of blooming sword light appeared in front of him, which was compressed within 10 feet. If the power of the sword light was not suppressed by the secret method, the whole seat, even if the Gilon department is scrapped. The young cultivator sighed and stopped. It turned out that this Dharma image had been cut into pieces by countless invisible sword chi. And he is Lucian's out-of-body yin god, but he is not a yang god. Lucian asked, "Master Chen Shan, is this going to start a war?" Chen Pingon took the silver deer back into his sleeve, and greeted Xiago again, "Let's go." The sable-capped girl who was squatting on the wall of the Gilon office snorted, turned into a sword light and rose from the ground, followed Xiao Mo and left. The terrified tall and thin old man gritted his teeth and said, "What a shame." And the woman who seemed to be afraid that the world would not be in chaos nodded and said, yes, it's a shame. But that's it." Lucian just looked up at the half-collapsed Sishiantai with a solemn expression and sighed softly. On their way back to the sky, Xiago complained that his hands were not warm, which was too unsatisfactory. Xiao Mo asked, "Young master." Because Xiao Mo found the sun next to him, he seemed to be absent-minded. Chen Pingon shook his head and smiled, "It's nothing, it's just distraction." 10,000 years ago, by the bonfire on the top of the mountain. Chen Pingon alone is a Taoist who has traveled far and mind to know and guess his identity. There are the most holy teachers, Taoist ancestors, and Buddhas. The first monk in the world, Lan Qi, the ghost, the leader of Kendo, Wu Zhu, the first ancestor of the military family. Chen Qingdu, Li Xing, Bai Zai, Mr. Sanshan Zhouho. A woman in high spirits, she raised her hand and shook an item that had just been cast in her hand. "Look, wait, it must be of great use." The young monk on the side stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "I'll take a look." There was a burly middle-aged scholar with both hands clenched on his knees, eyes closed, or nodding or shaking his head. Sitting next to him, Wu Zhu, with his words like songs and chants, discussed the rhythm with the later most holy teacher. Little Master, the future saint, holding a branch and drawing circles on the ground. Bai Zai squatted aside, resting his cheek with one hand, watching the Little Master's pen strokes. A young Taoist priest, with a gourd vine hanging from his waist, pinching his fingers with one hand, constantly changing, spreading out his palm with one hand, carefully watching the lines on the palm. A charming woman, standing behind a burly man, with her arms folded on the man's head, raised her chin towards the young man, and said with a smile, "Don't always provoke him, this stuffy gourd is the most. Be careful, you have a bad temper." The man laughed heartily, "I'm afraid he'll be an egg. When I'm done with my boxing skills, I can beat him with one hand." The woman smiled brilliantly, but the boy just twitched the corners of his mouth. The one sitting far away from everyone, surrounded by clouds and fog, with a blurred figure and no face, this person just had a sword on his knees. He gently flicked his fingers, then tilted his head slightly, and listened to the sound of the sword chirping. A young man with a mild smile, with a hairpin on his head, was adding wood to the bonfire. An extremely handsome young man, lying on the ground with his legs up, his eyes bright and staring at the sky. On the side is a young Jinsho with thick eyebrows and big eyes. From the perspective of future generations, it can only be regarded as Zhou Zheng. He is not that kind of ridicule, but said to the young man lying on the ground in a serious tone, "You look so ugly. Be careful, you won't be able to find a Taoist companion in the future." The young man raised his thumb and pointed at himself. "In terms of appearance, I have to be like Qingqingdu, you can't." The handsome young man rolled his eyes. He took out a scroll of bamboo-woven Taoist books from his arms, held it up high, and looked up. The three Jinsho, Guanzhao, Yuanxiang, Longjun, and the later Tuotian patriarch, and Chuxing, even got together for a drink, and they seemed to have a good relationship. Longjun smiled and said, "The Bixiao cave master of Luobaodin, it's good to be here, and the wine he brews is delicious." Ancestor Tuotian held back his laughter and pointed his finger at the young Taoist priest. "Don't mention it, there was a fight for no reason, and I've never beaten us. I heard that Daoist Bixiao was sulking, and he stammered. Let him wait." Chu Xing smiled and joked, "If you can stop fighting, don't fight, learn from our little master, and speak some truth." Someone suddenly asked, "You said that after a long time, for example, 1,000 years, 2 or 3,000 years later, what kind of world will it be?" The kendo leader, who almost never speaks to anyone, hesitates to speak, as if he rarely opens his mouth, but in the end he still doesn't say anything. Chen Qing squinted his eyes and smiled, clasping the back of his head with both hands, and whispered, "They will all be very free, those who can go up the mountain to practice, and protect those who can't practice." The future ancestor of Tuoyua Mountain was in high spirits, and suddenly raised his chest. "It must be so." The burly scholar gave him a thumbs up. A middle-aged man with his eyes closed all the time opened his eyes and smiled and said, "If you tell me that, I will hear it." Hearing this sentence, after a moment of silence, they burst into laughter together. This is what was once the earth on earth. And they are about to go to war for the entire world and heaven. Sword of Coming Chapter 1007. The Tianmu Gate where the Confucian Temple accompanies the sages and sages is not connected to each other, so Chen Pingan and the three just went to the sky again, and then returned to Hauran through the Gate of Aquarius. Now that they are over Aquarius Island, they don't have to worry about their journey. They go to Dalachizu, and the three of them descend like a stairway. Overlooking the mountains and rivers of a continent, the clouds are in the blue sky and the water is in the bottle. The bouncing Xiago turned his head to look at Xiao Mo, and sighed, "Xiao Mo, you are dressed like this. It is reasonable to say that it is rustic, but it is different when you wear it. You are very handsome, so real." In response to a poem, there is no scene in front of you. Xiao Mo was silent. Xiago walked swaggeringly, swaying his shoulders like the little water monster who patrolled the mountains. Yellow hat, blue shoes and green bamboo stick, soared immortal treads all over Longtu Cloud. After staying in Luopao Mountain for a long time, Xiago has learned a lot of habits and worldly customs. Xiao Mo endured and endured. Xiago seemed to be thinking like a spring, and he couldn't stop it. 3,000 years of searching for swordsmen, the dead trees of the road are in spring again. Ever since I saw the plum blossom, I have no doubts until now. Chen Pingan asked with a smile, "Why isn't the opening chapter 10,000 years?" Xiago sneered, "Can it be better than 3,000 years?" Chen Pingan nodded and said, "That's true. It seems that reciting poetry is right for this line of work, and Miss Xia has entered the hall." After Xiago put his hands together, he slowly said, "The world is as short as a spring dream. Throw the hairpin down the mountain pavilion, and pick up the waterside hairpin. You must pay attention to all of them. You must see clearly, and carefully recognize your own family." Chen Pingan was silent for a moment, really couldn't stand it, and said, "Xiao Mo, just be yourself in the future. Xiao Mo hesitated for a moment, then said, Beijing's sour sentence is better than limericks. Chen Pingan, who was walking in the middle, raised his hands and gave them a thumbs up. You two are made in heaven. Xiago suddenly said, it seems that Li Shixing is on his way here. Chen Pingan nodded and said, you two should go back to Luopa Mountain first. After I've finished talking with him, I'll go directly to the village school. In fact, before being called away by Chen Pingan, Xiago secretly left a meeting gift at Lu Xixiantai and Jilan office. After they left, and it was almost half a stick of incense sticks, the entire Lu family had a change like a cow turning over and a fish arching its back. It is estimated that now the Lu family is too busy to clean up the mess. The repair cost alone is a large amount of Guyu money. Not long after Xiaomo and Xiago Yufeng went to Luopao Mountain, Li Shixing appeared near Chen Pingan with a smile on his face and said straight to the point, Chen Pingan, Mr. Sanshan Joho asked me to send you a message, so you don't have to guess. He traveled to Lizhu Cave, and he did live in the Mud Bottle Alley for a period of time, but it was not long, only a few years. As for what happened later, this senior still let you not think about it. You brought it on yourself. Speaking of which, Li Shixing smiled and said, don't worry, this senior's comment on your self-inviting is a compliment. Chen Pingan breathed a sigh of relief. Li Shixing smiled and said, from the geographical point of view, you are indeed neighbors, but after so many years, there is actually no origin to speak of, you can be relieved. Chen Pingan finally verified one of the conjectures from Li Zixing's side. Li Shixing said in his heart, Chen Pingan, I'm just going to tell you one of my guesses. You've heard it before. Do you know that Mr. Sanshan Joho cooperated with the Holy Saint and tried to establish a new ceremony for the Hauran world? Chen Pingan nodded and said, I heard Mr. talk about this, and I know some inside stories. There was once hope of a Lord of Humanity in the world. Li Shixing glanced at Chen Pingan and nodded. Since he had already learned the truth, he didn't need to say more, and changed the subject. Have you heard of the hard work of Li Piafeng? Chen Pingan smiled and said, Master Lu has mentioned this person many times, and he is envious. The hard work of the warriors in the Qingming world is the same as that of the barbaric sundial. Li Shixing said, in every world, there is such a person. And the one who is in the world, he does not agree with the practice of ritual sanctification, so the new ritual cannot be implemented. Chen Pingan declined to comment on this, and he really did not dare to jump to conclusions. After hesitating for a while, Chen Pingan said cautiously, Zhong Kue. If speaking of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Chen Pingan, who served as the last hidden official, is a variable. Then Tong Yizhou, there are two variables, one is hidden and the other is obvious, they are the handyman disciple of Fui sect, and the gentleman of Dafu Academy, Zhong Kue. Chen Pingan wanted to know if Zhong Kue was one of the inheritors of the Taoism of Mr. Sanshan Joho. Li Shixing smiled and said, since it's all speculation, you might as well be more courageous. Chen Pingan was shocked. Zhong Kue is one of the clones of Mr. Sanshan Joho. Originally, he had most guessed that Zhong Kue was the reincarnation of a certain direct disciple of this senior. As Lu Chen said, if Mr. Sanshan Joho rarely showed up, he hardly showed up, otherwise, if one of those ghosts and immortals who violated the precedent rule appeared, one would be beheaded. This unobtrusive Mr. Sanshan Joho, from the path of his own cultivation, to the inheritance of Taoism and the collection of disciples, is extremely hidden. Because An Feng, who temporarily lived in the fire temple in the capital, had leaked some secrets to Chen Pingan before, she learned of a direct disciple and two relatively young anonymous disciples. The documented direct disciple was Qin Jun, whose administrative office was located in Fangzhou Mountain. And the status of the three ancient mountains is even higher than that of the 5 mountains in the vast Middle Earth, including Suishan today. In addition, 2 anonymous disciples, Taoist Wang Min, who were also chief practitioners of the same era as Bai, went out to sea to visit immortals according to the edict. Another swordsman, Lu Yu, appeared and ended very quickly in Howren world. The old coachman from the Thunder Department of the ancient Heavenly Court once mentioned Mr. Sanshan Joho with Chen Pingan in the capital, and also talked about the old Huangli, saying that Mr. Sanshan Joho once stopped in Liju Cave, but the length of time is unknown. But one thing is certain, Fulu Street and Taoya Alley in Lizidongshan, in the final analysis, are all because of him. Fulu Street is naturally Fulu Street. The peach blossoms in Taoya Lane were also planted by Mr. Sanshan Joho. In fact, even the 3 kinds of gold and fine copper coins minted by the Dali dynasty were all carved mothers gifted by Mr. Sanshan Joho. And Jianxiu Lu Yu was born in the Lu family of Fulu Street, and was inextricably related to the Lu family of the Lu family. Chen Pingan guessed that Jianxiu Lu Yu, although it seemed like a flash in the pan, did not leave much of the mountain deeds, but it is very likely that he will always be alive. Memories, that's why the Dali court was so afraid, and did not kill off the line of the Lu family on Fulu Street. Li Shixing said helplessly, I dare to go to the Lu clan in the Middle Earth to smash the field. Is Master Chen Shanju so courageous? Chen Pingan was stunned for a while, looking at Li Shixing. Li Shixing nodded lightly. Guessed right, that's it. Of course not all. Li Shixing asked, remember how you met Lu Xianying? Chen Pingan nodded. It was Lu Xianying who was chased by a group of his peers to Mud Bottle Alley. The young man who came from wealth and wealth was not afraid of the sky and the earth. The person in the lead is the son of the Lu family on Fulu Street. This person is still fighting for a wealthy future in Qingfeng City. Li Shixing smiled and said, if my deduction is correct, Lu Yu's reincarnation is that white dress. The first sword cultivator in Beiju Luzhou, by Chang. So, isn't Su Xian the second disciple of Mr. Sanshan Joho? No wonder this guy, Su Xian, acted so out of tyranny and dared to run rampant in Beiju Luzhou. Chen Pingan took out a piece of paper from his sleeve and handed it to Li Shixing. After Li Shixing took over, he smiled and said, there is no doubt that the original works, please treasure them well. The Lu family on Fulu Street once gave a few pages of ancient books to Nan Pin, who was still Queen Dali at that time, all of which are ancestral things. One of the pages seems to record the simplest wall penetration technique on the mountain. Heaven and earth are connected, the mountain walls are connected, soft as apricot blossoms, thin as paper pages. I pointed a sword, opened the door quickly, and obeyed the order of Mr. Sanshan Joho. At that time, the southern hairpin, or Lu Jiang on the family tree of the Lu clan of the Yinyang family in the Middle Earth, because she had not used the string of rhinoceros beads at that time, and the late Emperor Dali was actually quite restrictive to her. So the southern hairpin was I don't understand how precious this page is. The two chatted while going down the mountain, and when they approached the earth, the territory of Dalachuzu was unobstructed. Only the sky above the exclusive village and town was still haunted by clouds and mist, and the road was unclear. The last time I reunited with Jigue was in the ruins of the old Dada Dragon Palace in Tonggishao. I once asked her a question whether she knew Mr. Sanshan Joho. Although Jigue didn't give a definite answer, it was obvious that not only did she know him, but she hated and feared him even more. An iron locked well, but it happens to be Zhu, the real Dragon King who is surviving. That breath of anger allows her to communicate with the outside world. The Jinju Mountain, which is located at the border between the town and the mountain to the west, is where the Lizhu, titled by Zhenlong, is located. A dragon beard stream, and the main street of the town, are 2 dragon whiskers that are hidden and visible. Fulu Street and Taoya Lane are respectively a dragon neck and a section of dragon ridge, and every mansion on the street is a talisman. The size of those houses is very important. Every peach tree in Taoya Lane, with its roots digging into the ground, is a trapped dragon nail. Fulistrate is used to suppress the chi-fu at the neck of the real dragon and prevent it from rising, which imprisons the bones and muscles at the spine of the dragon, so that its body cannot move at all. The dozens of dragon kilns that burn porcelain are known as the 1,000-year-old kiln fire. For Wang Zhu, it is a veritable fire cooking, just like being in an oil pot. Therefore, the small-town kiln workers open the kiln every time porcelain is pouring hot boiling water soup into a frying pan. You must know that this talisman method is not only suppressing a real dragon, but suppressing the fate of the dragon in the whole world. If he is not careful, he will frantically fight back against the overwhelmed person who is the originator. The consequences can be imagined. The monk is most afraid of being contaminated with the cause and effect of the world, but it is never a false statement. Li Shixing explained, it was a long and cruel torture, and for Wang Zhu, it was also a kind of forced tempering and penance. Only after getting through it can you be reborn, and you will be free until you see the sun again. Body. The town didn't start out with the 4 surnames and 10 clans that it is today. The first Qi practitioners who settled down and took root in this ancient battlefield, after they spread their branches and leaves, as time passed, their respective forces grew and grew, such as a certain surname's family. It has declined and has to sell its ancestral property and move to a boundary such as Erlang Lane and Xinghua Lane. After the delivery of the land deed, the original old mansion was demolished by the new owner. This is exactly what Wang Zhu's hope lie in, and she has endured one torment after another in the long years of 3,000 years. Mr. Qi had sympathy for her back then, so he protected her a lot. It's just that Wang Zhu was not fully enlightened at that time. He was ignorant and didn't appreciate it. So Mr. Qi, and of course your neighbor, are very special in Wang Zhu's mind. When Li Shixing said this, he suddenly stretched out his hand and asked, "Is there any wine?" Chen Pingan smiled and took out 2 jugs of wine, sat down with his legs crossed, and gently bumped the jugs with Li Shixing, drinking separately. Every foreign great monk who passed by the old Longzhou, as long as the realm is high enough and the eyesight is good enough, can see some clues of different depths. Just like Xiao Mo, in his eyes, the ruins of Lizhu Dongtian, which fell to the ground and downgraded to a blessed land, can make Xiao Mo have an illusion, and being in it is like confronting a pure sword cultivator of the 14th realm, and the 2 sides are close to each other. Within easy reach. So the last time he heard the young master talk about the idea of 2 flying swords for the first time, Xiao Mo gave a suggestion. He could carefully figure out the landscape pattern of the town, which was equivalent to asking Mr. Sanshan Jiuho to seek the law. It is precisely because there are hidden secrets and knowledge everywhere in the town, which is somewhat similar to the 11-level punch of the first ancestor of the military family. At that time, Chen Pingan retreated in spite of the difficulties and said 2 words, "I want to make a flower bloom in Zhao now, and now I want to imitate this grand formation, which is a bit too ambitious." However, this is the direction the avenue is pointing, so there is definitely no problem. The big deal is to spend more time, relying on the stupid skill of dripping water and piercing stones, and slowly dismantle it bit by bit. In fact, Lu Jinglong, who is proficient in the formation method, has long discovered that the existence of the town itself is a treasure mountain, and it is simply a wordless Taoist book. After all, Mr. 3 Mountains and 9 Marquis was regarded as the originator of the world's talisman lineage. At least half of the so-called 72 talismans of later generations were pioneered by this senior. Chen Pingan thought for a while, and pulled out a piece of paper from Xinhu. The painted places on the paper are all scenes that Chen Pingan has remembered deeply, and the line drawings and rough places are people and things that are vaguely remembered. Li Shixing took the paper, glanced at it, and asked, "Is it the Ghost Valley of Luzhou in Beiju?" Chen Pingan nodded. It was the first time he visited the Ghost Valley of the Bone Beach. In Baojing Mountain, he met Yang Ningzhen, who was a warrior of gold at the time. The latter was in the mountain to obtain the so-called 3 mountains and 9 hours. After passing the time, Yang Ningjun gave it to the younger brother Yang Ningxing, known as Little Tianjun, who has now entered Baiyujing to practice. On the night boat, Wu Shuangjiang also mentioned a secret matter to Qin Pingan. In the early years, Wei Shi, the great monk of the White Island, who had crushed all the monks of the same generation, began to try to join the ranks of the top 10 after 100 years of ascending 4 realms. As a result, after the failure of the first time to join the road, Mr. Sanshan Zhouhou personally went to the capital. According to Wu Shuangjiang, it was an initiative to make concessions sideways, leaving a door halfway for Wei Shi. Unfortunately, Wei Shi still failed to seize the opportunity, and when the 2 attempts to join the Tao failed, Wei Shi seemed to have no heart to try the third one. Li Shixing handed the page back to Qin Pingan, and couldn't help but laugh. I finally understand why Mr. Sanshan Zhouhou wanted to say to me, "You don't have to be restrained, you can do whatever you want before leaving." It turned out to be an evaluation of your statement. I've been making random deductions along the way, and it's all a mess. Qin Pingan laughed at himself. As for that person, I have too few clues now. If the Dogwood Peak Tianwan is used as the anchor of a long river of time, I think it will only be a start or a wrong path. Wrong way. After thinking about it, I want to change to a Qi trainer who has both intersection with the town and enough weight as the coordinates, so that the waves of the long river brought by that own Taoist method will not disappear as soon as it rushes. Even with Li Shixing around, Qin Pingan still dared not say the word Zhou Zi directly. Previously in the outer world, Qin Pingan didn't dare to speak about this matter several times, for fear that he would get a negative answer from Mr. Sanshan Zhouhou. This means that Qin Pingan must start over and find another candidate. To talk about Lu Qin, of course, the realm is enough, but definitely not. It seems that every monk who mentions Mr. Sanshan Zhouhou, more or less, will carry a spontaneous respect. Even if it is Lu Qin, who is not stingy, when he first became a disciple of Daozu, he would even say a big talk with Chunying Lu Yen, who was traveling with Baiyujing. The world's Taoism naturally begins with the master, the Daozu, and then on. The fire was passed down to the brothers, and the incense flourished in Lu Qin. In the future, Lu Qin will return this splendor to the world. But when Lu Qin mentioned Mr. Sanshan Zhouhou, he also respected him. Well, only one counts as an exception. It was the first gatekeeper of Luopao Mountain, Xing Dafeng. When Zhou Zi visited Lizhu Cave, he set up a stall selling candied haws on Xinghua Alley. And this person's junior sister Tian Wan, the peak owner of the Dogwood Peak in Jingyang, also secretly entered the town and found the old man who opened a wedding shop. His real name is Kai Dao Huang, which is Hu Feng's grandfather. The master, and he only had half of the marriage book left in his hand. For some reason, it fell into the hands of Lu Qi all the way, and was taken to the Qingming world by the latter. But Tian Wan still got a batch of Yulao red lines, which she used to control people's hearts, and then through the marriage lines of Li Tuanjing, Wei Jin, Lu Xianyang and others, messed up the Mandarin ducks and mastered the swordsmanship of Bai Pingzu. The circulation of luck is her way of practicing her own way. It is even more plausible that Bai Shang, formerly Lu Yus, is a native of Lizidongshan in Bai Pingzu. Equivalent to the leader of the 2 continents kendo of one bright and one dark. And the red rope cannot be refined or imitated, so Xing Dafeng used a saying that was praised and criticized at that time, even if it is Mr. Sanshan Zhouhou, his old man's Taoism is enough to pass the sky, and it can't be refined. Especially when he said this sentence, Xing Dafeng seemed to be pondering, and seemed to remember some old things. Qin Pingan asked curiously, Mr. Lu Qi traveled to the Qingming world, hoping to gather a marriage book as an opportunity to get along. Li Shixing nodded and said, because the second half of the book is on the singer of the re-examination of the Taoist title. She is the reincarnation of the Ancient of Marriage. Li Shixing smiled and said, a digression, the Christian carp in Chishui is very delicious. It is definitely not inferior to the apricot perch that jumps in the Po River. You must try it when you have a chance. Chen Pingan nodded. Li Shixing took a sip of wine and asked, how do you feel after this battle? Chen Pingan remembered the lettering on the top of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and it looked like a plank road in the mountains. Fishing nets rush through the grid, as if they come and go freely, and they can even use those ropes as a habitat, but Qi practitioners are like big fish. Break free, such as becoming a land fairy, and joining the 14 realms of Taoism. Seeing the same. Li Shixing smiled knowingly, put down the jug, took out a ring of hemp rope of ordinary material, and then tied it with many knots, and said with a smile, before Baiyujing Green City was scattered, I thought this was what we were doing. The world. It was only later that I felt that the whole human world was just a book. But the script was never in our hands. Just like someone can pick out a single page at random, they can extend a series of new stories. Reading is like a tree, and turning a book is like enjoying the shade. Hearing this, Chen Pingan couldn't help but ask, do you want to come now? Li Shixing smiled and shook his head, no clue. Chen Pingan shook the jug, and before he knew it, he had finished drinking a jug of wine, and took out another jug of wine, but Li Shixing waved his hand, you drink, I can't drink enough, it's rare to drink. If it is said that human feelings are repeated, the world will be bumpy. Then drink, only drink and get drunk. Li Shixing looked at Chen Pingan who kept drinking. He couldn't imagine that the young man in Mud Bottle Lane would become so good at drinking. He asked with a smile, have you figured out how to polish 2 flying swords? Chen Pingan wiped the corners of his mouth and said, in addition to eating gold and copper coins all the time, we also need to keep adding bricks and mortar. Buddhists say that one dust contains several moments, and Taoists say that one and all things go to the same destination by different paths. Li Shixing nodded and said, the bird in the cage covers the 10 directions of the world, and the moon in the well achieves a long river of time, gathering 1,000 small thousand worlds. For example, Chen Pingan planned to buy those extremely rare sycamore leaves with the fellow Daoist Qingping sword sect. However, there is no certainty. It is estimated that Qingtong will not nod and agree. At most, he will not sell, but only give away, and he will only be willing to give away a few sycamore leaves, no more than 10, so he has passed away. Chen Pingan's psychological expectation is at least 3 leaves, of course, the more the better. As for how to repay Qingtong, it is not difficult. After all, the 2 sides are close neighbors in the future, and there will be more opportunities to deal with each other. Chen Pingan could see that Qingtong obviously wanted to establish a school, but he felt guilty and did not dare to take the initiative to mention this to the Confucian temple. Previously, in Qilalong, on the side of Chaoyong, the old Qiantang Chang, after obtaining the consent of this great grandmaster, Chen Pingan stripped the contents of the poems recorded in the local chronicles, totaling hundreds of thousands of words, from the book. Turned into a long golden river and poured into his sleeves. In addition, Chen Pingan once obtained a book in the Xianfu ruins of Beiju Luzhou that no one cared about at the time. It wrote many joys and sorrows, and different life stories. Since ancient times, reading books has a long night. Chen Pingan worked as a school teacher in the village, and every night he wrote a series of landscape stories about young rangers and the giant lake monster. I believe that we can definitely give a surprise to the millet, just like watching a vivid mirror of flowers and water. A young ranger with excellent swordsmanship, fighting side by side with the dumb lake monster who serves as a military advisor and think tank, fighting wits and courage with all kinds of monsters. However, this long story, Only the hilltop in the line of bamboo tower can be watched together with the millet grains, and other people don't think about it. Unlike the illiterate Inlu, who would find it too difficult to write a book, Chen Pingan found it harder to have the patience to read a book for a long time. Li Shixing said, "Chen Pingan, to be precise, we both still have the same surname." In fact, both of them are surnamed Chen, but they are not familiar with the same surname. Chen Pingan was of course a native of Lizhou Dongtian, but Li Zixing's ancestral hometown was in Luzhou, Beiju. Chen Pingan nodded, knowing this for a long time. The three brothers and sisters, Li Baoping and Li Baozhen, are called Li Shixing as the eldest brother. Li Shixing stood up, the breeze was blowing his face, and he smiled and said, "There is a cloud in the ancient poem, why should I hide my name when I succeed? I am not a thief who walks at night." Chen Pingan said, "This sentence has to be written down." There is nothing to do, the two of them walk side by side, the wind is cool, and they are in a peaceful state of mind. Li Shixing, who gradually recovered his predecessor's memory, was missing by Yujing's two junior brothers. Chen Pingan was worried about the situation around Liang and his senior brother. The reason why he was not worried was because his intuition told Chen Pingan that the result was not the best, but certainly not the worst. It's just that for some reason, Firen and Chuxing have already appeared in the wilderness, and there is still no news of the two of them. Before leaving, Jing Juzhong gave a strange statement, one was a long time ago and the other was a long time later. Chen Pingan and his senior brother were left and right, aside from the first brief meeting. In fact, it was during the years in the Great Wall of Sword Qi that he could barely look like a senior brother. Although left and right also taught this little junior brother swordsmanship, in his words, Chen Pingan could clearly feel that the senior brother did not pay much attention to his identity as a sword cultivator. Senior brother left and right is more like a scholarly and diligent scholar, dedicated to the pursuit of the three immortality of scholars, and to make merit and meritorious deeds. In fact, Chen Pingan was very curious at the beginning, but because of this senior's temper, he didn't dare to ask. Later, Chen Pingan couldn't help but ask, "What is the name of the flying sword of my brother's life?" As expected, the left and right faces turned ugly on the spot, and they blocked Chen Pingan back with just one sentence. "Why didn't you ask when Mr. How dare Chen Pingan continue to ask questions, and if he continues to ask, he must be at his own risk." Chen Pingan was suddenly shocked, and then relieved, because Li Shixing had already said goodbye and rushed to Tongye Continent. Xiao Mo's figure fell in the small town, and Xiago, who followed him, asked suspiciously, "Don't you just go back to Luopa Mountain?" Xiao Mo said, "Find a roadside stall, have a late-night snack and come back." Xiago frowned, feeling a little uncomfortable. He picked a late-night snack stall on the main street of the town. After Xiaomo was seated, he ordered 2 bowls of wontons stuffed with pork and shepherd's purse from the stall, took out a pair of chopsticks from the bamboo tube on the table, handed it to Xiago, and asked softly, "What?" "Time to return to the wilderness." Xiago remained silent and wiped the pair of bamboo chopsticks with his sleeves, as if he was off. When the stall owner brought 2 bowls of steaming wontons, Xiao Mo took a pair of chopsticks and said, "Don't be stunned, eat while it's hot." Xiago held a chopstick in each hand, stabbed a wonton in each, and put it in his mouth, his cheeks bulging. "So bad, don't pay for it." Xiaomo chewed and swallowed slowly, and said slowly, "I know you haven't stripped your soul, you have always been you, and you have always been Bai Jing. In short, the so-called thank the dog is a lame disguise. Thank you dog with a straight face." Xiaomo continued, "If it's an accommodation, I don't think it's necessary. If it's a gesture of playfulness, it can be as usual." Xiago asked, "Then which one do you think is more pleasing to the eye?" "To be honest, it's not pleasing to the eye." Xiaomo has always treated people with sincerity, paused for a moment, and said with a smile, but I admire that Bai Jing who seems to be running forward forever. It was like this 10,000 years ago, and it will be the same after 10,000 years. In the past, the first time he saw Bai Jing was when he saw a sword cultivator from a distance, surrounded by a heavy siege, and his sword was fierce. In the end, she was standing on the corpse of a deity that he personally killed, with a slender figure. The woman, with her long hair tied in a ponytail, wrapped around her neck, raised her head high. She didn't know what she was muttering. Her figure flashed away, the sword light was like a rainbow, and a very long arc was drawn in the air. The earth shook with thunder. Xiago looked complicated. He only listened to the first half of the sentence and was not surprised, but the second half of Xiao Mo's sentence made her a little uncomfortable, so she picked up the bowl and took a sip of clear soup. The wontons were not tasty and the soup was good. When you check out later, give a few more coins. Xiago said dully, I don't know how to like someone. This kind of is much more difficult than practicing swords. It is not easy to let Xiago admit that he is not good at something. Xiao Mo said, don't be wronged, put yourself in a little position and think about how I feel. Xiaodong grinned. In the end, it was Xiao Mo's account, and she didn't rush to pay. Walking on the street together, Xiago obviously started to curl his tail again. He said, Xiao Mo, if only we had a daughter, just like Millet, every day is silly, we take her well protected, don't worry, grow up slowly day by day. Xiao Mo was speechless, and after holding it for a long time, he uttered a sentence that he believed was enough to clear the relationship, just be happy. The girl in the mink hat spread her hands, jumped forward with her feet together, and was happy to herself, happy, really happy. Xiao Mo remembered the first time he saw Bai Jing. But Xiao Mo had no way of knowing when and where Bai Jing saw him for the first time. After all, the first official meeting between the two parties was when Bai Jing said frankly that he wanted to ask him about Jian, and then formed a Taoist partner. Looking at Xiao Mo who was confused, Bai Jing also explained that who asked Jian who won. Who sleeps? In the sky, Zhang Jiaolu saw the lively scene from a distance, and began to lie down on Yufeng, with his face up to the sky and the water in the back. It was indeed a leisurely stroll. As a result, an old Taoist priest lifted his foot and stepped on his face. Lu Chen quickly shrank his head, avoided the soles that were about to be pushed up, turned his body over and stood still, with a hippie smile and bowed his head. I have seen Uncle Bai Xiao. Lao Guanzhu stood on the spot and sneered, this kind of liveliness knowing the result, what's so good about it? There is a little master, and the trajectory of the green road shows that from the beginning, the wild world did not want to be burned with a jade stone from the Howren world. Otherwise, returning to the wild by Zhe, he would not watch the two fairies stagger into one. It was obvious that it was the one who was careful in the disgusting Confucian temple, and then made Li Xing unable to pass the old road he had walked by himself, and successfully filled the vacancy left by the most holy teacher after his dispersal. I saw Zhang Jiaolu's eyes were dull, and there was suffering. Uncle Bai Xiao, you are stricter than others and more lenient than yourself. Lao Guanzhu said, I'm here to see an old friend, can I be the same as you? Lu Chen complained, this little Mo, it's true, I don't know how to take the initiative to come to see my uncle, just rely on his friendship with me and travel far and wide across the world. I will go to the sky to meet me, who would dare to stop me? Master Lao Guan said indifferently, Master Lu remembers what he said today. Lu Chen said angrily, Xiao Mo is here to be a guest, so don't make too much fanfare. It's best if you've seen Uncle Bai Xiao, come quietly and go quietly. Lao Guanzhu said that Lu Yan's great achievement will be very high. Lu Chen nodded vigorously and said, I am fortunate to travel to Qingming with fellow Daoist Chunyang, and I am honored. Lao Guanzhu smiled, as for Bai Jing, once she is among the 14 realms, it should not be underestimated. Lu Chen is still a chicken pecking at rice. All of them are powerful, all of them are powerful, all of them are arrogant and talented, anyway, poor people with small arms and thin legs are all fond of it. Lao Guanju sneered, I have seen Chen Pingan's 2 flying swords with my own eyes, plus the last sword of harmony. Is Lu Zhangjiao afraid after thinking about it, and his neck is cold? Lu Chen rubbed his chin and started talking nonsense seriously. It's okay, I'm good friends with Chen Pingan, we can only drink when we meet, not swordsmen. Lu Chen had previously returned to the Qingming world alive and well, because Chen Pingan did not contact Jing Juzhong and Wu Shuangjiang, who had already met, so he escaped. Thinking about it so far, Lu Chen still has lingering fears, and it is no exaggeration. Therefore, the third headmaster of Bai Yujing once had a review with the old Guanju uncle. According to the old Guanju, the key is how the other party detained Lu Chen's dreams and feelings. To deal with a 14 realm, after all, there is no shortcut. Just like Zhou Mi's siege of Fuyao continent against Bai Yi, it can only be honestly exhausting Bai Yi's poems in his heart. Before that, Bai Yi was holding a fairy sword. It's the same as being invincible. Lu Chen knew very well that the abbot in this siege was Chen Pingan on the surface, but behind the scenes was the haunted embroidered tiger. It is not unusual for Cui Yu and Mr. Sanshan Joho to learn several ancient methods of sealing mountains. Based on this, Cui Yu's brain is like a peak rising from a plateau, which is normal. That kind of embroidered tiger claims to be second, no one dares to say first. Once Cui Yu and Jing Juzhong had a private exchange of Taoism, and then the latter learned it, and finally Chen Pingan was responsible for the first move, Jian Xiu was in charge of the middle game, and Jing Juzhong and Wu Shuangjiang were in charge of the finale. It was not an unrealistic fantasy that completely trapped all Lu Chen's thoughts. At that time, the old Guanju said a sarcastic remark, 2 beta Shengjing is in the middle, and 1-year-old except Gong Wu Shuangjiang, there are 3 14 realms. Plus Qi Tingji, Ning Yao, Hao Su, Lu Ji, Chen Pingan. This kind of lineup, with such a big pomp, is just to deal with the 14th realm. Yu Lu Chen can be proud of it and secretly have fun. At that time, Lu Chen really turned his back, squeezed out a smile, opened his mouth wide, ha, ha, ha. Like this, he laughed 3 times in a row. The old master glanced at Lu Chen, no matter how he disliked seeing this third headmaster of Bai Yujing, even if his eyes were as high as his own, he still had to admit that Lu Chen's aptitude for Taoism, especially Taoism, was really good. Lu Chen can be considered one of those who truly dare to say that his Tao heart is heaven's heart. For thousands of years, aside from the 14-level monks who hide their heads and hide their tails, such as the savage land law words and the big demons, as well as the female crown Wuzhou who deliberately hides their whereabouts, and Bai Zhe was imprisoned in the Xiongzhen Tower by the Confucian Temple. As a result, there were 4 great cultivators who were recognized as the most playable in the world. Bai Yi, even if they were not pure sword cultivators, still had the most killing power. The master of Bixiao Cave in Luobaodan, and later the old master of Taoist Temple in Donghaiguan, has the highest Taoism. There was also that old blind man who was driving the golden armored warriors by the 100,000-strong mountain, who didn't know what to do. His identity was the most mysterious, and his cultivation base was bottomless. In addition, the monk Shinqing, nicknamed the Chicken Soup Monk, has the strongest defense and is known as the number 1 invincible golden body. He was also sworn by someone, who made a stern statement, and advertised it to the outside world, saying that any Ascension Realm sword cultivator other than him, chopped up the old monk for 3 days and 3 nights. However, the old Guanju and the old blind man, the way of the 2 sides of the road, is still cloudy and foggy, and there is no conclusion. Because someone said it was the killing power of half a 14th level monk, and the defense of 1.5 14th level monks. Half plus 1.5, so it's not like 2 14 monks. So let him see, among the 14 monks, you are the most powerful monk in chicken soup. As soon as these words came out, the world shook. So that the old monk was about to be chased and chopped almost every 3 times. This Buddhist dragon elephant, who was only known to the top of the mountain for 3 sects, could not stand the endless harassment, no matter how good his cultivation and temper were. Later, the old monk finally seized the opportunity to find that fellow, and he insisted that the open-mouthed guy clarify it with outsiders through various Shanshui newspapers. Not surprisingly, we didn't talk about it. That fellow was determined not to change his mouth, saying that I was always responsible for what I said, spit and nails, and told me to speak against my conscience. The chicken soup monk had to compliment each other twice. Liang, is your addition and subtraction so strong? Could it be that when you were studying in the school, in Yesheng's mansion, everyone else was studying, and you were the only one who was eating? That thick-skinned guy, not angry but happy, put his hands on his hips, and only said such a novel way of complimenting people, blushing. Lao Guanju asked, have you ever thought about the world in 10,000 years? Lu Chen asked back, is this something that is useful when you think about it? The old master said, then open your eyes and see what is in front of you. Lu Chen smiled and said, it seems even more boring. If you wait until the 3 sect patriarchs are gone, and immediately select the new top 10 heroes in the world, there will be little suspense, and there will hardly be too many objections. Anyway, it is enough to choose from the 14 realms. Li Sheng, Dao Lao Yudo, Lu Chen, Bai Zhe who returned to the wild world, the first ancestor of the military family who ended the long prison term. The master of Bixiao Cave, the monk Xinqing, the old blind man of the 100,000-strong mountain, the middle of Beidasheng, the female crown Wuzhou with the Taoist name Taiyin. As for the candidates, if only 4 or 5 are selected, and then the timeline is extended to Jiazi or 100 years later, there may be more disputes. The key is that the variables are not small. Xuandu Guan, Sun Huaizhong, and Wu Shuangjiang all belonged to the 14th realm with less seniority after all, and the 2 of them made it clear that they would not deal with Bai Yujing. Daomen Sansyen, Chunyang Lu Yen. As well as the new Bai Yi who is currently practicing in Xuandu Temple, although he is now in the Jade Pure realm, he will definitely be able to rank in this column and occupy a place. In addition, Vishan Lin Jiangxian, Chao Xiai, Ku Wei, and the 3 pure warriors in the Qingming world all have not a small chance. Ning Yao in the colorful world. Brilliant in the wild world. These 2 are the co-owners of their respective worlds. In addition, there are Savage Anonymous, Bai Jing, Criminal House Su, Lu Ji, Zhang Fenghai, Su Jun and so on. A strife with a big change unseen in 10,000 years, chaos, and heroes rise together. In particular, the younger generation in the world is very likely to attack. In short, the next 100 years will be a great year for all cultivators in the world. Lu Chen stood in the boundless emptiness, wearing a lotus crown on his head, his sleeves drooping, his expression solemn, and he suddenly said, what do you think I will immediately enter the 15th false realm? Lao Guanju smiled and said, it's easier said than done. Lu Chen smiled suddenly, uncle, don't tell me if you see it through, otherwise you won't have many friends. Lao Guanju said, I have not been able to enter the 15th realm even after cultivating the Tao for 10,000 years, and I can't climb the ranks of the 15th realm just by talking. Lu Chen immediately corrected, pseudo-realm. The old watcher said indifferently, is there 1,000 leagues? Lu Chen wondered, can this idiom still be used like this? The old watcher is too lazy to talk. Lu Chen stretched his back and went back to his house. Bai Yujing was busy. The old master asked, when the Buddha dragged you into that mysterious world, what did you see and experience? According to your perception at the time, you have spent tens of thousands of years, hundreds of millions of years. Lu Chen's dazed expression flashed away, and he quickly returned to normal, smiling. I have indeed seen a lot of worlds, one obstacle after another, the ridge to the ridge, whether it is rice or barnyard grass, after all, it is impossible to cross. If the inductive method of the attic in the sky is a trail, then the deductive method that seems to advance step by step is just a trick. In short, looking back, these so-called houses and ladders, anyway, we think the way and the road, it's not important at all, the only important thing is that I understand a truth, we all feel that we are very small, and we always feel that there is a sky outside the sky, but maybe, it may be just the opposite. The old master said, but you still need to have an eternal coordinate to help you determine this possibility, otherwise it will be the end of the boat and the sword. Lu Chen snorted, otherwise, it's still a dream in a dream. Always ask yourself, what do you think so much about? Lu Chen asked himself and answered, but what can I do if I don't want so much? Lao Guanzhu smiled and said, I once heard an old friend put forward a whimsical idea, saying that every lunatic in the world is the real master, and has long been on his own. Lu Chen said regretfully, if it weren't for the old friend of Uncle Shi, Pin Dao would have to meet and have a good chat. In Lu Chen's eyes, cultivation is not only anti-customer, but also a thief of heaven and earth. About 3,000 years ago, there was a young Taoist priest who went out to sea by boat, and his face was inexplicably full of tears. Because he feels that to the end of his cultivation, even if his realm is as high as the 15th realm, he is actually guarding an endless field, and he is always just a tenant farmer who does not know himself, only with someone who never sees each other and will never meet. Landlords lease fields and work diligently, year after year, to take care of crops. We ourselves can never know who we are. Lu Qin moved towards boundless Taishu, gave a soft feed, and then asked in 2 words, "Are you there?" He then stretched out a hand, put it by his ear, and listened, as if waiting for a reverberation, and gave the answer. The old master looked at the Taoist priest who was once again full of tears, but with a smile, sighed, and slapped the other person's shoulder. Lu Qin, don't be stupid, go drinking with your uncle. Lu Qin regained his senses, but he pulled up Lao Guanzu's sleeve and wiped the tears from his face. Uncle Master said it earlier. A young Taoist smiled and said, together. An old scholar who rushed to the outer Star River in a hurry, saw Yu Xian, grabbed the hands of the old man with both hands, shook it vigorously, looked left and right, where's Daoist Chunyang? Yu Xian smiled and said, unfortunately, fellow Daoist Chunyang just left. The old Shiozai has a bigger range of motions in his hands. Brother Yu, hard work is worth a lot, although I haven't witnessed this trip with my own eyes, but I just think with my knees, and I don't need to guess at all. I know that Brother Yu has made another extraordinary contribution, that will inevitably delay the process of entering the 14th realm. Brother, if I were the top clerk of the Confucian Temple, I would never have the heart to dispatch you brother like this. Yu Xian smiled and resolutely refused to talk. You are a literary sage and a famous hobmeet. You can arrange Lixing and Yaxing at will, and I will not go into troubled waters. The old scholar whispered, listen to my close disciple mentioning a regret, saying that Brother Yu once tried to draw a brand new 5 sacred talisman, and the big talisman was a big one who was just wandering around Suishan. Sighed, hit a wall, only to fall short. Yu Xian broke free from the hands of the old scholar and waved his sleeves. It's a misunderstanding, it's nothing, that fellow Daoist Qin misunderstood. If Qin Pingon talked to him about this, Yu Xian would tell the truth. After all, the character of this young hidden official can be trusted. Because before discussing matters in the Confucian Temple, Yu Xian, Wulong Zhenren, and Zhao Tianlai, the 3 of them chatted. Wulong Zhenren emphasized one point, doing business with Qin Shanju, you can rest assured that you can make sure that you don't lose money, you just need to close it. Eyes receive money. But since it's an old scholar who has come to negotiate business and has nothing to do, he still has to take it easy. The old Shotsai said, "What kind of friendship do we have, my own brothers? I'm not an outsider, let's talk. How many caddies of Suishan soil do you need? Is 5 caddies enough? If not enough, it'll take more, 10 caddies." Yu Xian smiled and said, "Wen Sheng, stop joking. Anyone can go to Jiui Mountain, under the eyes of a mountain monarch, fake an imperial decree, and want to move away a few pots of Wenyun calamus, even if you can get it. I dare to accept it, dare to buy it." The old Shotsai slapped his chest and said, "As long as Brother Yu is willing to speak up and speak the truth, my brother can go to the mountains and seas of fire. A few kilograms of soil are nothing, and I can guarantee that the idiot who travels around will never trouble anyone." Yu Xian was suspicious. Is it really possible? The old Shotsai smiled and said, "Just don't worry, on the silly side, I won't mention you brother half a word, just make up a reason. For example, if you need it, you can get away with it." Yu Xian Nianchu pondered for a moment. Will this reason be a bit lame? This is obediently hooked, isn't it? The old Shotsai nodded vigorously. I am a scholar after all, and I am really not very good at lying. Yu Xian said, "Why don't you say that your close disciple needs 5-color soil? It seems that this reason is more reasonable." The old Shotsai hummed, "It's possible." Yu Xian asked tentatively, "What's the price?" "Do you have 5-color soil? Naturally there is no market price for reference." The old scholar stomped his feet and said, "Brother Yu, why are you still scolding the master? This is too unpleasant to say." Yu Xian's head suddenly froze, and to be honest, he really hoped that he would only have a refreshing money exchange with the old Shotsai, not to owe favors, especially not to owe the favors of the old Shotsai. Therefore, Yu Xian, who felt that he had already jumped into a big pit, did not plan to jump into the second one again. The money is clearly a man, and the brothers are clear. The old Shotsai said, "The problem is that our brothers are not real brothers." Yu Xian smiled awkwardly. The old Shotsai immediately remedied, "Can't you be closer than an ordinary brother?" Yu Xian's smile stiffened. Brother Yu is not tall, so the old Shou can pat him on the shoulder without tiptoeing. I heard that my close disciple borrowed 300 gold and copper coins from my brother. Yu Xian's heart tightened. It was not good. The old Shotsai sighed. How much Gyu money is this? Yu Xian's face was sullen. He made up his mind, and he was determined not to let go. Chen Pingan and Luo Peishan had to use the gold and copper coins to pay them back. Gyu money. Yu Xian will lack this thing. If the old Zaikai's plan failed, let's make another plan. Brother Yu, let's discuss it. Why don't I, the gentleman, pay for this debt? Yu Xian bravely insisted on his opinion. Not good. There is only the truth of father's debt and son's repayment. How can there be a saying that a student owes a debt to a gentleman to pay his debt, you pay back? How to repay? It's not on credit, 300 pieces are not enough, and the annual profit is rolling. I am afraid that one day I owe 3,000 pieces, let alone pay it back. Just when Xian was about to accept his fate, the old Xiao Kai was too happy to take care of himself, took out a bag from his sleeve and handed it to Yu Xian. You are frightened, just take it with confidence. I have made it clear to Zhou Yu originally. The 10 kilograms of Suishan soil was something that the stupid big man nodded in person and agreed. He also said that if the weight is not enough, you can just say hello to Suishan when you come back, and you don't need to go to Suishan in person. And then there's that gold and copper coin, Ping An's child, who knew the most from the cold and the hot when he was a child. He will definitely add the principal and interest. There is a lot of money, and I will return it to your senior. It's not that I am complimenting people. In the matter of not owing favor, I, a closed-door disciple, are better than me, but have the same character as you. Of course, Brother Yu has never been worried about a single word of money in his life. In this regard, the two of you are different. Yu Xian put away the bag full of dirt, nodded and said, Chen Pingan is lucky to have you as a gentleman. It is also a blessing for Wen Xing to have Chen Pingan. The old scholar smiled brightly. Good, these words are great. Yu Xian said, let's drink some wine. Don't worry, good wine doesn't have long legs and can't run away. The old Xiuzai shook his sleeves, straightened his clothes again, stretched out a palm towards Yu Xian, and said with a smile, fellow Taoist Yu Xian, please take a seat. I was in Treasure Pingzhou, in the imitation by Yu Jing, discussing with a senior, talking about the world, and having a little experience. Tonight, the Tianhe River is clear, and it is best to discuss with the heroes. Yu Xian was stunned and speechless, his heart was shocked, he took a deep breath, made a solemn gesture, bowed his head, and said solemnly, please enlighten me. Chen Pingan returned to the village school in Yanzhou Prefecture. As for the avatars scattered all over the place, none of them dared to leave Aquarius, and they all woke up one by one. Zhao Shu, who had been standing under the eaves, looked at the master who had returned to the school. Chen Pingan explained with a smile, I went to Tianwai and did some small things within my power. Well, it was barely a small favor. What does the master do in the outer world, and who does he help? Although he was very curious, Zhao Shusha didn't ask any further questions. Chen Pingan said, just leave me alone, go to bed early and get up early. Zhao Shusha nodded and went back to the kitchen to lay the floor. In the darkness of night, a slender figure who was very fast in the wind, with a turning point, fell to the ground. Chen Pingan lay on a rattan chair and closed his eyes, holding a fan in his hand and placed it on his abdomen. The talented woman just glanced at it on the way to the wind, and when she saw the face up close and confirmed it was correct, she was suddenly shocked. Why did this young hidden official come here? There are mainly 2 monks in charge of looking after the ruins of the Dragon Palace. She is one of them, but it is not because of her great Taoism. It is just that this Dragon Palace has a great relationship with her, and she has made a contribution to opening the door. Not small. Therefore, the real person in charge is another imperial consecration of Dali who is hidden in the dark, the old Yuaning, who acts prudently and is proficient in air and water. She is the female cultivator of Fengshua Temple, Yu Huiting. It's just that he has been serving as a cultivator of Dali's army all these years. Wei and Jin belonged to the lineage of Shengxiantai. According to the genealogy of the ancestors, she called Wei Jin as Shishu, and there was no problem. In fact, Yu Huiting admired this Uncle Wei very much. Of course, the entire Fengshua Temple admired all the female cultivators from Wei and Jin. Tonight's Yu Huiting still wears a knife around his waist, wearing narrow-sleeved brocade clothes and black gauze trousers. According to Mi Dajiangxian, in her early years, the embroidered shoes on her feet had 2 longan orbs on the toes. It's just that she used it as a stepping stone to open the ban on the Dragon Palace. She saw that the young hidden officer didn't respond, only snoring slightly. Yu Huiting hesitated for a moment, thinking that the other party had issued an invisible order to evict guests. I plan to arrive floating, and then leave, quietly, with interest. The reason why she came here is that according to the espionage, the previous new appointment, Zimeyi Gaozhou, seemed to have been to this remote village at the foot of the mountain. Anyway, she was idle and wanted to come here to see. It's just that Yu Huiting really misses Master Wei in her heart, so she didn't leave in the wind. She bit her head and coughed softly, and said in a low voice, Master Chen Shan, take the liberty to visit the door, and I hope you forgive me. This time, I didn't make a special trip to find Chen Shan. Lord, it's just a mistake, it's just an accident. Chen Pingan opened his eyes, immediately sat up, and said with a smile, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I was thinking about something just now. Yu Huiting naturally didn't believe it. A great sword immortal, or a martial artist of Zhijing, can't detect his own movement. Chen Pingan pointed at the bamboo chair under the eaves with the fan, and said with a smile, "It's relatively simple. If Miss Yu doesn't mind, you can sit on it casually." Yu Huiting just sat down. The Gao Brewing, who had previously been instructed by Qin Shanzhu, hurried here to report the situation to the young hidden officer after receiving a decree issued by the Ministry of Rights to various landscape gods. After seeing that Yu Huiting, Gao Jiu looked embarrassed. It seemed that he had fallen short of the standard when he visited the door earlier. Chen Pingan smiled and asked the two of them to wait for a while. He went to the kitchen and brought a low table, put it under the eaves, sat around the table, 3 bamboo chairs, 3 white bowls on the low table, and a few dishes. Wine-side dishes. Looking at the young hidden official who had set up the wine table, Yu Huiting burst into laughter. Why did he drink wine here inexplicably? Is it a wild anecdote? Chen Pingan has already had a drink with Gao Niu. It's really nothing. In this matter, Chen Pingan and Wei Shishu seem to be the same kind of people. Yu Huiting is not the kind of woman who is squeamish. He picked up the wine bowl, took a sip, and asked directly, "Uncle Wei was at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, what else did he do besides practicing swords?" When Gao Niu lowered his head to drink, he smiled. It is said that the hero is sad for the beauty pass, and the beauty is not the heroic pass. The world's pass, the highest level of love. Guanshan is difficult to overcome. Going up is easy, going down is hard. It's not that the mountain road is difficult to walk, it's just that I don't want to leave the mountain. Gaojiu twisted up a salted peanut and threw it into his mouth and chewed slowly. Men don't all come here like this, who hasn't felt a bit of lingering sorrow in the past month. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Wei Jianxian is still very prestigious over there. Although he is usually rather unsmiling, he is actually quite popular. He is one of the very few sword cultivators who can chat with the boss Jianxian. Wei Jianxian is also a big customer of our wine shop. He is the only one. The shop is the most expensive and of course the best drink. He has wrapped it all up. Buying wine is refreshing, and drinking is even more heroic. I believe that when Wei Jianxian returns to Beia Pingzu, his swordsmanship will improve a lot again. To tell the truth that most people can't believe it, Fengshua Temple Wei in Jin, now the swordsmanship is short." Yu Huiting suddenly smiled when he heard the words. Even if the content of what Qin Shanzhu said is like wine and water, but even so, Wei Shishu and the boss Jianxian can't be fake, right? Is it possible to talk nonsense about the evaluation of swordsmanship? Friendship of fellow villagers, this is the very precious fellowship of fellow villagers. Gao Niu immediately nodded in agreement and said, "If I remember correctly, we monks from Aquarius Island, who stayed on the side of the Great Wall of Sword Qi and stayed there for a long time, Shanzhu Qin and De Jianxian Wei, must be well-deserved heroes to cherish each other." Beautiful talk. It's a pity that Shanzhu Qin and Dejian Wei, you are not the kind of temper that likes to brag about yourself, or even dislike praise from others, otherwise your fame will be at least doubled. Yu Huiting was speechless for a moment, just refuting it. Chen Pingan held back his laughter and shouted to the kitchen, under the tree, "Make us a late-night snack, and then come here for a drink." Chen Pingan smiled and asked the two of them again, "Do you have any taboos, too?" Yu Huiting wanted to hear more stories about Uncle Wei, so he was polite and said there was nothing taboo. "At this moment, Gao Brewery can't be driven away, so I wish I could stay here for a while, I just say it's free." Although Yu Huiting didn't like the officialdom very much, she was not the kind of monk who didn't know the world, so at the wine table, she took the bowl and took the initiative to toast Gao Niu twice. After that, there was another Zhao Shuxia. Chen Pingan made no secret of his love for Zhao Shuxia, and introduced with a smile, "Brother Gao, miss you, this is my direct disciple, surnamed Xiaoming Shuxia, and now I learn boxing and swordsmanship with me. It's my luck, a proud disciple that can only be found." Hearing that master said that, Zhao Shuxia's face was full of embarrassment. Yu Huiting didn't take it too seriously, Gao Nyang seemed to take it too seriously, and even Zhao Shuxia didn't dare to take it seriously. Chen Pingan didn't care anymore, he was telling the truth anyway. After that, the table was full of chat and laughter, and the atmosphere was harmonious. Drink each wine without persuasion, it is like a spring breeze. Sort of Coming Chapter 1008. Aquarius Continent Xie, one of the many vassal states of the Dali dynasty, the capital of Yushuan Kingdom. In the night, when the lights are on, a fortune-telling booth on the street, the middle-aged Taoist priest who was lying on the table and was drunk, hit excited, he raised his head, and still looked like he was intoxicated. He picked up the jug at hand and drank the rejuvenation soup that was sober with alcohol. Then he exhaled a long breath and prepared to close the stall and go back to the house. The Taoist priest stretched out his sleeves, quietly weighed the purse, and earned some silver coins, most of which were copper coins. There are some children on the street who return late from a spring outing. The grass is green and willows are yellow, and they are drunk and frivolous. They return to the city on horseback at night, as if their hooves are stained with the fragrance of spring grass. The middle-aged Taoist began to pick up the fortune-tellers on the table, twisted up a few copper coins for divination, and rubbed them all the year round. The pulp was shiny, threw them into the fortune-tellers together, and then pulled up a tablecloth full of surnames. Usually Taoist priests here, just look at the sign text to measure good and bad luck, read palmistry to others to calculate the marriage, and also measure the characters, write family letters and so on. They can make up some household expenses. The capital cost is not as good as the local counties and counties in Yuxuangguo, the price tongue-tied. As for people's surname guessing, it was a kind of adjacent skills that he learned from Xia Heaton in his early years. They were all in the rivers and lakes. I still remember that one of her dreams when she was a child was to take her master together, walk the rivers and lakes and make a lot of money in partnership. Looking for a bustling road, she first helped to beat the gongs and drums and shouted, and she became popular. Master first played a few knives, and then played the chest to beat the big stone, and sold dog skin plasters and dolly pills. Urching, he is very good at it. Of course, the hard work is a bit hard, but after all, other people who are not on the table make a living, and they don't earn money without conscience. Chen Pingan smiled, and it seems unlikely that he would be like this with the great disciple of Kaishan. Even if he was willing to be a master, it is estimated that Pei Qian himself would feel nonsense. This fortune-telling stall is now quite famous in this area of the capital. But of course, they can't get into the eyes of dignitaries, and it's okay to deceive the common people. In the eyes of real Qi practitioners, they are no different from those who have been deceived. Except for some scattered objects, the main thing is a table, 2 benches and a flag. The so-called table, the panel and the table legs can also be disassembled, which is convenient for moving. There is a wooden cart behind the stall. Put those tables, stools and banners on top of it and you can walk. Heaven and earth are big, and the 4 seas are home. However, this Taoist priest still rented a deserted house in the capital that has been neglected for a long time. It is not haunted. It is not a gloomy and murderous house, or the people who live here often seem to be pressed by ghosts. If nightmares are haunting, it is easy to not sleep well. Over time, the spirit is naturally lethargic. Over time, no one is willing to come here to spend money to buy sins. It's a bit like the kind of stubborn fox charm recorded in the Book of Strange Monsters. The master of the house has invited so-called Haigong Taoists to come to impeach and rule. After a period of time, there was a commotion again, which is really no way, not to mention that the owner of the house has a wealthy family, and his ancestors and grandchildren have been specializing in the lease and sale of Beijing Mansion, and there are still a large number of them on hand. It's not a big deal if people are killed. Then finally came a big head, a Taoist priest from a foreign country. He bullied students, and the rent price did not decrease. Anyway, he was destined to become a repeat customer, so he asked the Taoist priest to give a half-year deposit at one time. Later, the Taoist priest really suffered, and immediately became unhappy. He came to the door to make trouble twice, and was easily dismissed. A contract, written in black and white, written clearly and clearly, it is my responsibility to break the lawsuit. What can you do if you are a Taoist priest with no roots and no support? What's more, the people in the capital of Yushuan Kingdom are notoriously xenophobic. The Taoist priest wanted to find a lawyer and seek justice from the county master, but no one dared to help write the letter. Later, the fortune-telling booth became famous. The owner probably thought that the enemy should be resolved rather than settled, so he asked the son who had taken a job in the county Yachengfa house to invite the Taoist priest to the restaurant for a drink, and then returned a part of the deposit. The son-in-law, who was the clerk of the government office, put his feet on the table, burped his wine, and teased him, "Aren't you a Taoist priest who subdues demons and slays demons, and you're still afraid of those ghostly dirty things?" The Taoist priest just replied with a smile, "There are different paths, yin and yang are different. If you only rely on the magic of the immortal family, fight and kill, when you often walk by the river, when you don't have wet shoes, you still have to be with people and ghosts. All are good." After all, he is a son who has been in the public gate for many years. He immediately picked up on his words, knocked on the table with his boots, and asked Dao Changwu with a smile that these words were hidden in words. "Is it a ghost or a human to make trouble?" Tonight, the middle-aged Taoist pushed the wooden cart back to the house, came to the side door of the house, and took out a bunch of keys. There are no steps here, so you can directly push the cart to enter. The Taoist priest had just locked the door when he floated a woman in a red dress without touching his feet and teased Dao Changwu, "That is, our court is not strict, otherwise you are a fake Taoist priest, let alone settling in the capital. Can't get into the city. The palace like bun makeup, the skin is like snow, the eyes are charming, the face is tender and the temples are long. Too bad women are not human." The Taoist priest immediately retorted, "Miss Xue, this is a bad statement. According to your Yushuan country regulations, within a country, in addition to the Daolu Academy under the jurisdiction of the imperial court, the Taoist priests issued by various altars are also considered private. The imperial court has always recognized it." The poor road went to the door, managed the relationship, spent a full 80 taels of silver, and bought the ultimatum with real money, not to mention the Yushuan country, even the capital of Dali dared to go. This is called reasoning to travel all over the world, and the body is not afraid of a crooked shadow. It is equivalent to buying an amulet with 80 taels of silver. Without this status, Taoist priests from other places who want to make money from stalls will probably be stripped of several layers of skin by those yamen and subordinate officials. The woman nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, why is it not an official with an oblique seal? Her surname is Xueminggrui, she is a ghost, but she has nothing to do with the vicious ghost, and can walk in broad daylight without hindrance." Only when the nearby county Yashingtang heard the mighty sound of the subordinate staff hitting the ground, she would avoid entering the house. The Taoist priest took out a paper pocket flower cake from his sleeve and gave it to the ghost in the red skirt. This is the second rent he needs to pay. After setting up the stall every day, he has to spend a little money to buy some special food in the capital. The hostess of the house, otherwise she will be a ghost and haunt, not hurting people, but she will make noise all night, dangling outside the window, people can't relax, Taoist priests want to sleep peacefully is an extravagant hope. After a long time, they got to know each other's tempers. Now the two sides are in peace with each other. They can even chat a few times at ordinary times. Taoist priests often ask her about the rules of ghosts and ghosts. Wu Di, an old-looking Taoist priest, is said to have already thought about his future Taoist name. He took a homonym and called it Invincible. She is a Yin spirit and doesn't care about diet, but there is a vulgar neighbor on this side of the house, who must eat 3 meals a day. She complained a little. Wu Di, why are you coming back so late today? I'm hungry. Hurry up to cook. Give Zhang Ho cooks a delicious meal. He is just growing up, so he can't do things indiscriminately. Zhang Ho is about to take the academy exam. If he can get into the pan, I will blame you. Taoist priests are naturally good-natured and unpretentious. This Taoist priest does not treat himself badly. He likes to be poor. For example, to make a bowl of noodles, in addition to preparing cooking wine and various toppings, there are 4 or 5 kinds of oil and spicy peppers alone, with chopped ginger, green onion and garlic. Just pour it on. And then serve it hot. The taste is absolutely amazing. The Taoist priest went to the kitchen, with skillful hands and feet, and quickly prepared a table of home-cooked dishes. The woman in the red skirt helped to serve the dishes and serve them. The female ghost went to call the young scholar named Zhang Ho from the next house. The reason why she lingered here was to take care of the descendants of the other party for the sake of a certain oath. As for the important place in the capital, just saying that there is a county town temple nearby, why would she choose to turn a blind eye? It involves a secret suggestion from a boss in the capital city temple. It is only 1 street away from the house, and it is one of the 2 county yamen in the capital. There is a Yi shrine behind the Ya office. At the dinner table, the Taoist priest was showing off that he had a close relationship with the official of the county salt house. How could he be well informed? He said that an internal discussion was held in the Yashin temple yesterday, and soon there would be a few people who would not change after repeated teachings and violated the house rules. By Shu, in a few days, they will be expelled from the county government office in a fit of rage. They can of course change their name and enter a certain house to make a living, but they don't need to spend 30 or 50 taels of silver for class rules and cases. Fei, don't even think about going through the affairs at the Yashin temple. Zhang Ho is a man who doesn't listen to things outside the window and only reads the sage's books. Every time he hears Wu Di talking about these things, the young man will get impatient, but he can't help but not open his mouth. In addition to the 6 rooms in a county government office, there are also 4 rooms for salt, warehouse, Cambodian and inheritance, with a total of 10 rooms. The subordinates and yamen who work here are divided into those who are in the book and those who are not in the book. The so-called not in the book is just compared with the imperial court. There are actually 2 types, which are in the hands of the officials' offices and the officials of the various offices. Therefore, the number of yamen servants is so large that there are hundreds of people at every turn. I am afraid that even a county magistrate, who can be regarded as extremely diligent in administration, cannot figure out the exact number. But even the scribes who are set up according to the imperial quota and who eat imperial food have little status, not to mention the members of the various houses and classes who belong to the lowly industry. It is no wonder that teenagers are tired of these scraps' useless gossip. The woman in the red dress noticed the unhappy expression on the boy's face, and she immediately glared at the Taoist priest, implying that he should not mention these unpleasant affairs. The Taoist raised his glass and took a sip of wine, and said with a smile, "For someone like me who runs the rivers and lakes, news is money, so it is inevitable to deal with the 3 religions and 9 streams. After all, like Mr. Zhang and you, those who study sages and sages hard, are naturally rushing. It is a good thing for people who are economical to help people, and who will pursue their ambitions in temples and officialdoms in the future, but it would be a good thing if they know more about the ways below. In the future, if they really want to be promoted, they will be named on the gold list and become an official. The staff, the masters and the subordinates are just fooling around, otherwise they are separated from the common people outside the yamen. Woolen cloth. She seldom nodded her head and said in agreement, Wu Di is not only a three-legged cat kung fu who knows how to draw ghosts and talismans, he is a fake Taoist, and his name is probably fake, but these few words are still quite insightful. It's the same principle that you don't hold hands with money, just like Wu Di said, knowing more about the insider's officialdom, even if it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing. To be honest, she has lived in this street for hundreds of years, and sometimes she feels bored, and she occasionally goes to audit the internal affairs of the Yashan Temple or the Qinghuang Temple, but it really involves the inside story of the circulation of the officialdom in a county, I am afraid. She doesn't know as much as this foreign Taoist priest. The young man was silent, just lowered his head to eat. Obviously he didn't listen, he just felt that the Taoist priest was talking ragged, and he was a good teacher. The Taoist priest didn't take it seriously, raised his glass with both hands. Don't talk about troubles at the wine table, Miss Xue, let's go together. The teenager left after eating, said goodbye to the sister Xue, and was about to participate in the hospital examination for Zhuzheng's personal abbot, and the pressure was not small. When the Taoist was cleaning up the dishes, he smiled and asked, Miss Xue, you said that Zhang Ho doesn't like to listen to me because he thinks I'm a liar, or he doesn't listen to me because he thinks it's unreasonable, or for someone who has achieved success, the truth is the truth. She frowned, but she quickly stretched her brows, pretending to be understatement. Zhang Ho is not an old oily man like you, who has a pure heart, how can he think so much? The Taoist smiled and said, simple words can cure all diseases. She was not happy all of a sudden. The Taoist immediately clarified, it's definitely a compliment. After cleaning up the dishes and rice bowls on the table, the Taoist priest finished busy in the kitchen, washed his hands, shook his sleeves, and saw that Miss Xue was leaning against the door of the house, frowning. The middle-aged Taoist priest is a good person, and said with a smile, with Zhang Hao's knowledge, not to mention the success of the academy exam, and then to participate in the township exam and the general exam, it will only be a spring breeze and horseshoe disease, so why do you need to worry about Miss Xue? We'll be the first to come to announce the good news. Xue Rui smiled and asked, do you think Zhang Ho can be successfully named on the gold list? The Taoist thought for a while, it's not a big problem to get a jinshi. Pindao has read several articles of Zhang Hao's craftsmanship, and he used a slick pen, especially the first-hand pavilion style, which is upright and charming, no matter who comes this spring as the president, whoever likes it. At Xue Rui's request, the Taoist priest often went to the Beijing book market and bought a lot of sample essays for the examination room for the teenager. The Taoist priest walked to the door of her house, and the female ghost was floating in the air all the way. The Taoist priest took out the key, but did not rush to open the door. She smiled and said, is there anything shameful in the house? Could it be that Wu Daochang is hiding in the golden house? The Taoist priest said in a righteous manner, in the evening, it is the male and female who don't get along with each other, the lonely man and the widow, living together in the same house, and we need to avoid suspicion. She sneered, you are a Taoist priest, not a Taoist who is a daily person. The Taoist priest said solemnly, Pin Tao has also read many books of sages and sages. If he hadn't strayed into the mountains at a young age and embarked on the path of cultivation, he would have gained fame and entered an official career long ago. She took out a pen holder from her sleeve, shook her wrist, and said to herself, where should I put such an exquisite study offering? The Taoist priest's eyes lit up, he opened the door with lightning speed, pushed it open gently, and then stretched out a palm sideways, blue sky and white moon, just have a clear conscience, "Don't be afraid of rumors, Miss Shui, please come in quickly." There are many rooms in the house, but the Taoist priest specially chose a hut as his residence. In his words, the house can be large, but the sleeping room must be small so that it can gather qi. The spring air is getting warmer, and the sound of insects is turning green through the window screens. Entering the room, she placed the hexagonal pen holder with oil red painted gold, entwined branches and lotus, hollowed-out dragon pierced with zhizhi, and gently placed it on the table. The Taoist priest took out the fire book and lit an oil lamp on the table. Previously, this pen holder was placed in the flower hall on the side of the lobby of the mansion, which was used to entertain guests. At that time, he said that he was not greedy, that he saw a good object, and everyone has a love for beauty. Appreciation is purely appreciation. In fact, she also has a bamboo tree that has been treasured for many years. It is quite a few years old. There is a vertical green inscription carved on the seal, and the hero's heart is immortal. The Taoist priest fell in love at first sight and was willing to pay a high price to buy it. The so-called high price was only relative to the expenses of the market. She had no ears to listen to 200 tales of silver. There is a whole piece of glass lens on the desk, covering the entire tabletop. Seeing a stack of neatly copied scriptures on the table, she wondered, "You are a Taoist priest, why do you copy Buddhist scriptures?" The Taoist smiled and said, "Occasionally do it to reassure yourself." The Taoist priest moved 2 chairs and sat far away from each other. After Shui Rui sat down, she leaned forward, leaning her elbows on the chair handles, and looked at the middle-aged Taoist priest like that. The Taoist priest was a little uncomfortable when she saw it, and asked, "Miss Shui is visiting the humble house tonight, but what are your orders?" Shui Rui said, "As the old saying goes, distant relatives are not as good as close neighbors. Wu Di, do you think that is the case?" The Taoist nodded and said, "Of course, these old liar are the most reasonable and chewy." She hesitated for a moment and said, "I do have something to ask for. I hope you can help transfer the draft of Zhang Hao's poetry collection to a bachelor of the Hanlin Academy." The Taoist laughed dumbly, pondered for a moment, and glanced at the precious pen holder on the table. "I'm afraid that the poor Taoist can only see the doorman, and can't see the noble scholar." Shui Rui let out a sigh. The Taoist wondered why she was so messed up. Did she just hope that Zhang Ho could pass the imperial examination and jump to the Dragon Gate? If you want to be rich, just relying on her family background can only guarantee that the youth will have no worries about food and clothing for a few lifetimes. Even if Zhang Ho is already a hidden qi trainer, she will have everything she needs before entering the middle 5 realm on the road of cultivation in the future. It can be guaranteed that Zhang Ho will not have to worry. Besides, Zhang Ho was so young, he didn't need to be so anxious if he wanted to advance through the imperial examination. The female ghost Shui Rui and the young Zhang Ho are usually brothers and sisters. It can be seen that Zhang Ho is actually aware of her female ghost identity. She laughed at herself. "It was I who went to the doctor in a hurry. If Zhang Ho knew about this, he would blame me for the rest of his life." From the Taoist priest's point of view, the young man is an unquestionable seed for reading, but he is not a very good cultivator. His aptitude is average. If nothing else, it is difficult to enter the cave. Ordinary people, rich and noble families, pamper themselves with dignity, pay attention to a place to live, nourish qi, and nourish the body. On the other hand, the practitioners of qi, no matter whether they are ghosts or ghosts, have other mysterious functions. If you live in a cave in a mountain dojo, you only need to take a clean house and sit down, stop distracting thoughts and make a silent thought. Your body and bones will not move, but your qi and blood will travel with your soul, slowly absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and refine your bones like golden branches and jade leaves. With immortal difference. This mansion occupies a large area, especially the backyard is full of ancient trees. In the dead of night, there are several chirping sounds. The female ghost stood up and said with a smile, "Wu Di, just pretend that I didn't say anything about it." The Taoist priest got up and said, "It's okay, if you need to do something like this one day, Miss Shua will let the poor know, not to mention a scholar's residence with a high threshold, even the sea of fire." The female ghost smiled sweetly. Wu Dao Chang is really a condescending not to be a helper for those powerful people in the capital. The Taoist said helplessly, "It's so unpleasant to help idle dogs." Miss Shua said it's better to be a mastermind or a master. She reached out and touched it, put the pen holder back into her sleeve, and left. The Taoist priest couldn't stop it, so he could only watch the cooked duck fly away. The female ghost walked through the corridor alone, came to the backyard, and climbed up to the attic. From here, you could see the teenager in the next house, and the window of the study showed a yellowish light. A month aroused the sound of thousands of households smashing clothes, and woke up countless people in the spring boudoir's dream. The Taoist priest packed up the scriptures copied on the table, opened the drawer, took out the carving knife and stone, and began to carve seals. Among them, there was a pair of book collection seals with the same shape, and the base model had been engraved, and 2 side paragraphs were added respectively. "Do all the good, don't do the evil. Don't forget to give benefits, don't forget to receive favors." After he was skilled in his movements, he finished engraving the seal. After that, the Taoist used the light to read a local chronicle. The engraving of books in the capital of Yushuan Kingdom was extremely developed, and he bought a lot of good books here. Reading a new book is like a rainy season. Flip through old books, such as Xiaobia wins the newly married. Copying books requires sitting upright, and reading miscellaneous books is easy. The Taoist priest lifted Erlang's legs, took out a handful of melon seeds, and turned the pages while nibbling on melon seeds. There was another crackling sound outside the window. Middle-aged Taoist priests chanted words, and people for thousands of years passed away for a few minutes. Worry about diligence and indifference, not too bitter and dry. On this trip, this Taoist priest, who learned from Lu Chen's stall, is to come to a family to collect an old account. Therefore, the bottom part of one of the seals is carved with 2 characters, "After the autumn." Chen Pingon took out the sword-raising gourd, walked to the window, raised his head for a long time, drank the wine in the pot, and his eyes became brighter. Close your eyes, as if listening to a torrential rain from many years ago. There are 7 or 8 stars in the sky. In the suburbs of Beijing, there is a thatched hut and wine shop on the side of the road. The fox fur is drunk, and a noble boy spreads his hands and feet, holding a golden silk horsewhip in his arms, and resting his head on the thigh of the woman next to him. The people around you are like the moon, with frost and snow on your wrists. The beautiful woman sat on the ground with her skirt blooming like a red flower. She moved her hands gently, leaning over and rubbing her brows to help brother young master. There was a sound of hooves on the official road at night, and the young woman led the young woman riding a very handsome green horse, followed by a group of heroic and vigorous young girls, all wearing swords. And this group of young girls, each with long breaths, are definitely not embroidered pillows. Experts know at a glance that they are the kind of trainers who have the guidance of a master. She turned over and got off the horse, looking at the noble son who was hiding here and enjoying the happiness. She was not angry, her eyebrows stood upright, she raised the horse whip in her hand, and swung it vigorously. The whip sounded like firecrackers. The beautiful woman who was selling wine here raised her head to look at the young woman who came to ask her guilt. She smiled sweetly, put her finger to her mouth, and whispered softly, indicating that she should not disturb the man's spring sleepiness. The woman didn't even look at the fox, her eyes were too dirty to look at it. She just walked quickly into the wine shop, kicked the young man who was sleeping like a dead pig, and said angrily, "Ma Yenshan, don't pretend to be dead. The young men and women looked a bit similar. The nobleman who called him by his first name opened his eyes, yawned, sleepy, sat up and asked with a smile, "What's the matter? Who is offending you? Just don't care. Tell the second brother that there will be no overnight feud. The woman is angry and does not argue. Could it be that the family will rely on this kind of lazy person to lead the way in the future, and can't wait to throw a whip on the other side's face? Ma Yan-shan, look at your rotten alcoholic virtue, it is not worthy of Ma Che to lead a horse." Ma Yan-shan smiled and said, "It's just my cousin. Since I was a child, I can only read dead books and read books. When I was 3 years old, I really didn't curse this kid. I don't think he will be able to get anywhere in the future. Take 10,000 steps back and say, even if this kid has a bright future in his studies, what if he is a public servant? Besides, I'm not also a Tanhua Lang. Ma Che, this little bastard, if he has the ability, he can go to the middle school. I am a brother, personally responsible for hosting a banquet for him. Lu Bu, Xiao Jiuqing, how many Xingyin officials does he want to toast him? Is 5 enough? If not enough, I can call 10. Having said that, your son raised the arm holding the golden whip, shook it, then raised the other hand, and said with a smile, I'm afraid Ma Che won't appreciate it. That Ma Che is a recognized juvenile prodigy, a typical man in white, already has a reputation as a minister. Different from the so-called Ma Tanhua, Ma Che grew up in the rich and noble forest, and the young man has read thousands of books. Seeing that woman was about to beat someone, Ma Yan-shan had to beg for mercy. Ma Yueme, good sister, I'm afraid of you, tell me, what is the big deal? It's worth your trouble, take me home in person. Ma Yueme glared and reprimanded, family matters, go home and talk about it. Ma Yan-shan smiled and said, it's okay, Madame Song is not an outsider. The beautiful woman's face was full of helplessness, and she didn't dare to meddle in your Ma's housework. About 20 years ago, in the capital of Yushuan Kingdom, a family with the surname of Ma moved to the capital. As soon as they arrived in the capital, they bought an old house of the former prime minister at a high price. Within a country, the so-called rich family is divided into 3 realms. The first is that many people know that there are many such wealthy families. The second realm is only a handful of people who have heard of it. The last one is that all the common people and almost the entire local officialdom do not know, or even hear of it. The Ma family belongs to the last category. It is obviously rich and expensive, but its reputation is not obvious. Only a small group of ministers and generals who are in the center of the imperial court, and a few sects on the mountain, have heard of this foreign family. The specific origin is confusing, and there are only a few gossip that cannot be verified. It is said that this Ma family is a that money bag, with the surname of a certain Shangzhou kingdom in the Dali dynasty. Also said that because the current owner has a very promising eldest son, who went up the mountain to practice, is extremely talented, and is a land fairy at a young age. When one person attains the Tao and ascends to heaven, the whole family will follow. The largest restaurant in the capital, a Xianjia Inn, and the Xianjia Ferry in the land of Jiangyi are all private properties of the Ma family. In addition, there are a large number of silver houses and mines, but they are all recorded in the family. Under the name of the various puppets, it may be a prince, the family slave of the county owner, the beloved son of a servant, or a distant relative of the governor of Chaoyun. For example, this condescending Ma Yan-shan, who participated in the imperial examinations when he was a teenager, passed the test all the way, and finally rode a white horse to explore the capital. But in fact, it was his younger sister, Ma Yueme, who took the exam. He was a big brother, and he was a troll. Now he is an official in the Hanlin Academy, and he is too lazy to take the exam. As for the exam, he can't take the exam. In the capital of Yushuan Kingdom, from the Ministry of Rights to the Hanlin Academy, from the beginning to the end, there was not a single bit of rumors leaked out. It can be seen how exaggerated Ma's power is. When the family moved to the capital of Yushuan Kingdom, after more than 20 years of development, 4 generations lived in the same house, plus a few house brothers, the newly compiled family tree has more than 100 people. Although the Ma family is an outsider, it is not impossible to control the government, but the Ma family has no such idea at all. In fact, it is due to the shrewd mother of the brother and sister Ma Yenshan and Ma Yueme. Ma Yenshan squinted his eyes and said, "Let me guess, could it be him?" Finally went home. Ma Yueme was silent. Ma Yenshan said indifferently, "We are just such a brother, not a cousin or a cousin, a real brother. He is a big brother of a father and a mother with us. Yueme, talk about it, so many years have passed, has he seen us once since the two of us were born until today?" Ma Yenshan shook his head, stretched out a finger, and smiled. "If I remember correctly, it seems, maybe, probably, not once." The noble boy in the snow-white fox fur leaned back and raised his legs. "Where can I find such a good brother who cares for the family?" Ma Yueme said with a dark face, "Don't talk nonsense here, and hurry back to me." In her mind, to the big brother who has never even met, always respected like a god, if Ma Yenshan was the second brother, she would have been hit with a whip. In fact, when the two brothers and sisters waited until the war that swept across the continent ended and the world returned to peace, they had the idea of returning to their hometown to worship their ancestors a few years ago, but they usually loved their parents very much. In the matter, they disagreed with each other, and used various reasons to evade them. They only said that their family had moved out for so many years and the journey was far away. They were probably worried that Ma Yenshan and Ma Yueme would run away from home secretly, and even strictly ordered the brother and sister not to return to their hometown without authorization. Otherwise the family law will serve. The two of them repeatedly mentioned it with their parents several times, but it didn't work, so they gave up the idea. Because there is a Xianjia ferry at home, and there are 2 private ferries that run to the south for business and trade, so you can often get in touch with the kind of newspapers on the mountain, so the 2 brothers and sisters are curious about the hometown where their ancestral home is located, but it is different from the younger sister Ma Yueme, who is fascinated by the Liju cave, and Ma Yenshan are not interested in the Shinto Taoism on those mountains. The only thing he is curious about, this idle drunkard, is the night banquet at Piyun Mountain in Beiyue. Ma Yenshan wants to participate in one, and he will be content when he sees the world. Ma Yenshan stood up and said with a smile, "It's all right, go back and tell your parents, you will definitely go home and live tonight. If you don't see me within 2 hours, send someone to break my legs." Ma Yueme turned and left. Ma Yenshan winked at a girl who was riding a sword secretly. She was expressionless, but she was immediately whipped by Ma Yueme. A blood trough appeared on the girl's face instantly, and the girl remained motionless. Ma Yenshan was also indifferent to this. When they drove the horses away, they lay back on the floor and asked casually, "Is that brother of mine very powerful?" The beautiful woman smiled charmingly, nodded and said, "Of course. It can't be more powerful." Speaking of which, her eyes were in a trance and she sighed, but unfortunately she never saw each other. She is the local mountain god. The name of the mountain is Shur. According to today's landscape genealogy, she is a 7th-grade god. In a vassal country, there is more than enough. Ma Yenshan said with a dazed look, "Since it's a real brother, why do we not care if we do well, and do not care if we do bad?" She explained with a smile, "According to the saying on the mountain, entering the mountain to cultivate the Tao is shallow. It should not be too involved." Ma Yenshan let out a sigh, "Just say that the 6 relatives don't recognize it." She hesitated for a while, then leaned down, stretched out 2 fingers, and gently rubbed Ma Yanshan's temples, whispering, "Don't say this kind of prank talk in the future." The eldest brother of this pair of siblings, for a mountain of a small country like her, is simply the kind of existence that is far away and unattainable. A 40-year-old jade pure realm, the immortal realm, is a certainty, and may even be the ascension realm in the future. The top 10 young people in one continent. Behind his ass, there is Lu Baqiao, the sword immortal of Yuan Yingjing realm in Fenglai Garden, the direct disciple of Lu Laoqing, the immortal of the True Realms sect, and a young deputy mountain chief of Guanhu Academy. It's not unattainable what it is. The most incredible thing is that this person can command many ancient gods. She was worried that one day she was fortunate enough to see the other party, and if she disagreed, which one of her words was wrong, maybe the other party snapped her fingers, and her golden body shattered on the spot. Aware of the woman's slight strangeness, Ma Yenshan sat up again, and finally took out a pot of wine from under her skirt. The woman giggled. He raised his head and took a big mouthful of Xianzhou wine, stretched out his thumb, and wiped it. The corner of his mouth. I heard that my eldest brother has a bad temper. It is a fact that everyone knows. I heard that when he was practicing in the ancestral family of the military family, he did not let go of the door, and was abolished by him several times. A so-called cultivator is a troublemaker. The goddess of the mountain, who pretended to be a wine-selling woman, smiled softly. It is a blessing to have such a big brother in several lifetimes. Yenshan, listen to my advice. If you really want to meet, don't be angry with him. What? Ma Yenshan turned a deaf ear, and seemed worried for some reason. The woman asked suspiciously, "What's wrong?" Ma Yenshan shook the jug and looked up at the night. "Do you mean it will rain?" The woman covered her mouth and smiled and said, "Definitely not." Ma Yenshan murmured, "But one day, there will definitely be thunder and rain, right?" If it weren't for ordinary drinkers to say such silly things, the mountain goddess would have not heard it, but she knew very well that Ma Yenshan, who seemed to be golden and jade, was not simple. It is only said that the mountain of the Prince of Xie, that is, the immediate boss of Mrs. Song, valued Ma Yenshan very much, and often entertained this person in private. She thought about it and said, "It will rain sooner or later, but as long as there is such a big umbrella supporting it, let alone a soybean-sized raindrop, even if the sky falls, it will not be afraid of a knife." Ma Yanshan's expression was still full of haze. He closed the collar of the fox fur, and scolded in a low voice, "It's a cold spring in the dog days." Although Ma Yenshan wanders around the flowers all day and is notorious, he is more sensitive than the seemingly smart younger sister in the world of people. To be honest, Ma Yenshan treats his sister Ma Yueme as a fool, but she is his own sister after all, and she has a bad temper. Ma Yenshan has never cared about her. Ma Yenshan remembered that when he was a child, he took a late-night walk, followed the lights, and passed by his father's study, and found that his parents seemed to be talking about things inside. For some reason, his father was furious, and repeatedly scolded the bastard. "What kind of did you step on, to be able to cling to a mountain prince? The more you talk, the more angry you are, and you directly smashed an expensive official kiln pen holder," and the mother complained aloud, 300 taels of silver, just if it falls like this, it is more difficult to lose a family than to make money. Then my mother began to arrange that the surnamed Wei was not a good thing. According to the news, it seemed that it was just a humble origin from the land of Chiduan Mountain near Hongzhou town. A child, at that time, squatted silently at the corner of the wall and pricked up his ears. "Maybe you moved back then, as if you were hiding something." Especially in the past few years, the anxiety of the parents was even more obvious. Because of the Xianjiayin and the ferry, there were people who were specially responsible for collecting information on the old Longzhou of Dali. The news about Piyin Mountain and Nujiadu, no matter how big or small, would be secretly recorded on the record. Logically speaking, this makes no sense. Ma Yenshan knows the background of the Ma family best, but his father is very good at business, and he was born to be a businessman. His mother is also very insightful and courageous, and even more assertive than his father in many cases. In Ma Yanshan's words, it's just a special, come. The number of imperial madams with high enough rank in the capital is not many, not ordinary rich and noble, but now they all vaguely follow the horse's head. Hey, the horse's head is the guide, this well said, wonderful. If it weren't for an unfilial son like him who likes to stir up trouble, he really can't help it. It is estimated that the Ma family, which is intertwined with various forces, would have walked from behind the scenes of Yushuan to the front desk. Of course, Lin Zi is big enough to have all kinds of birds. The children of the side branches outside the clan's family seem to be inferior to him. They are proficient in eating, drinking, prostitution, gambling, and even causing a lot of deaths. Don't help wipe your ass. There are also some shameful things that he just pretended not to know. For example, in an imperial village in the land of Jiangyi, he set up a prison privately, which was specially used to kill people for fun. A group of children of the rich and powerful in the capital of the Yushuan kingdom will often hold so-called autumn hunts. In groups, they will go to several small countries in the south. In wild villages, they can either pick up a knife, or draw a bow and shoot arrows. Afterwards, the local government closed the case in the name of horse bandits and rogues, and even cheated with the imperial court for a military salary for training soldiers. Two offshoot children surnamed Ma. Ma Yanshan once saw with his own eyes a cowardly boy from a very good background. He was probably a reading seed similar to his own Ma Che. Since he participated in an autumn hunting trip on the Xianjia ferry, the boy never confronted people again. His eyes became sharp and unusual. The younger sister Ma Yuemei is still strange about this, and Ma Yanshan only jokes that he will be enlightened when he is a teenager. What's so strange, don't you believe it? Do you see him looking at women now, just looking at faces? You will see the long legs. The Ma family is not eye-catching in the capital. The streets where the carefully selected houses were located in those days were actually just run-down houses whose ancestors had passed away. Even many neighbors who had been in the neighborhood for 20 years just mistook the Ma family for a small family. Nouveau riche, usually when they get along with each other, they may not look down on the Ma family who only have a few stinky money. But the painted door gods posted on the gate of the Ma Jiafu, the family worships monks, and the group of digital nurses who are either in the 7th or 6th realm. Ma Yanshan has roughly estimated that the Ma family's secret background, not to mention dealing with a rival or enemy in Yuxuan's business, is enough to sweep down a third-rate immortal mansion on the Aquarius Mountain. Ma Yanshan put away his messy thoughts, reached out and patted the beautiful woman's cheek. I will definitely help with the change of the mountain name. This mountain goddess has always felt that Zhi Mountain is not good, and wants to change its name to Zhou. Instead of being annoyed, the woman smiled, gave 1,000 blessings, and thanked Ma Yanshan. Ma Yanshan walked out of the restaurant, put his thumb against his index finger, whistled, and soon came a maroon-red horse without a rein. The drunken noble's son got on the horse skillfully, threw the golden whip heavily in his hand, and ran wildly on the official road. On a mountain ridge near the temple of Zhi Mountain, a young man sat on the branch of an ancient pine tree and watched the wine shop at the foot of the mountain in the distance. He stood up and had a wide field of vision. Zhi Mountain has always been known for its towering mountains, and the surrounding mountains have an unobstructed view. The mountains in the distance stretch, like a temple and a courtier holding a jade wattle, and the beauty of the nearby mountains is like a lattice curly hair. This body is like being in a huge sea, and the blue waves hold their heads high and bow their heads. For the first time, this young man set foot on the territory of the mountains and rivers of the Yushuan country. He pulled the corner of his mouth and said to himself, "Immortal is the cage of immortality, and immortality is the price of immortality." The figure disappeared in a flash. On the other side of the wine shop at the foot of the mountain, the beautiful woman was closing the door. She turned her head to look at the young man who was walking slowly, and said with a charming smile, "Guest officer, I'm sorry, the wine shop is closing." The young man smiled and said, "Since it's open to do business, it's not too short of time." The woman frowned. If she couldn't see the depth of the other party's morality, she didn't care about the wine money, and a smile appeared on her face. "Master, the wine shop is small, but the wine is expensive." The young man nodded and said, "No matter how expensive the price is, Mrs. Song should keep it in Ma Yanshan's account." The woman's heart tightened, and an embroidered shoe gently rolled the soil with the tip of her toe, and pulled the golden body enshrined in the Jura Mountain Temple. The young man slowly walked forward to the wine shop, but when his first step landed, the goddess of the mountain was horrified to find that he had lost contact with the ancestral temple. When the young man and the stiff mountain goddess were about to pass each other, he suddenly stretched out his hand and put his arm around her neck, then dragged her back and walked a few steps, probably because he disliked the other party's burden, lightly. With a slight push, the beautiful woman fell into the shop, and the young man walked into the shop, sat on the ground with one on the ground, one hand on his knee, and waved again, "Hurry up, boil 2 pots of the shop's most expensive drink, the older the better." The woman swayed to her feet, trembling with fear, and said in a trembling voice, "Little god Zirshan Song Yen, dare to ask the name of the immortal master. I'm lucky, I cast a good tire and have the same surname as Ma Yanshan." The young man grinned and said, "Since you and I have such a good relationship with this precious brother, just call me by my name, Ma Kushwan." Song Yun's face was pale. Ma Kushwan asked, "Why, do you want me to cook wine for you?" When Jura Mountain God was busy cooking wine, he faced Ma Kushwan at the store's gate, resting his cheek with one hand, and stared at the dense bushes of weeds growing by the roadside. If he doesn't come to the capital of Yushuan Kingdom, it is estimated that he can only collect the corpse. It's interesting to say that he in Xinghua Lane, and the mud-leg surnamed Qin in Niping Lane, a fool in the eyes of his peers, a broom star who is afraid to avoid it, and then he left his hometown at about the same time, as if he was happy in this life. Traveling far away, they didn't spend much time in their hometown. New hatred turns into old hatred. Resentment is like spring grass, and the wanderer travels farther and survives. It is also like a jar of old wine that has been stored in the cellar for more than 40 years. Someone placed it on a table. Both parties drink it, whether they want to drink it or not. The drunk will die and the awake will live. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.